And here we are. Welcome back to the Redshirt Sophomore, where we never sit out. We're your hosts, MD and CD, and it is time. It is time. We're here to talk Big 12 football. It is our conference previews. These are the episodes that we have been hyping up now for months. They're here. It is your one-stop shop for football shop talk. This is all you need right here. We got a 3-hour part one episode. Part two is going to be coming out later this week. So make sure you guys check that out as well when it comes out. But we're going to be talking about 8 teams today. It's going to go alphabetical order, but Central Florida, we're going to put them in the C instead of the U for UCF. So if your team is in the top 8 alphabetically, we're going to be talking about them today in the Big 12. And boy, am I excited to talk about this conference because there are so many teams that I am super high on. Some interesting coaching staffs, some pretty good offensive line play across the board, underratedly. And I think this is the conference that is the most underrated conference when it comes to quarterbacks.
I would say it might be one of the better. I wouldn't argue against best quarterback. I mean, obviously the SEC's got some pretty darn good ones, but if you're talking about running backs too, elite running backs, and that goes hand in hand with the offensive line play as well. So it should be exciting brand of football that is the new Big 12 with these teams coming in. You've got the American influence, BYU, obviously the Pac-12 coming in, and then obviously your staples with the OG Big 12 teams. So it's awesome. Yeah, I hope you guys enjoy this. Obviously, like and subscribe. Like Matthew always says, if you like the content, like the video. That does wonders for our channel. We really appreciate that. Hope you can see all the effort and time that we're putting into this and the passion that we have talking about these teams. And also, these videos are going to be cut up individually as well. So you're watching the long form video. We thank you so much. But if you want to send a specific team to your buddy or to a friend or whatnot, that is a fan of that particular program, you can do that as well. And obviously tell them to like and subscribe as well.
Yeah, I'm just going to say each one of these videos takes at least $150 to $200 to kind of put together. So yeah, so a like would go kind of a long way. So we appreciate you guys helping us out there as we continue to grow this channel. Um, well, with that being said, CD, let's just get right into it. Wow, I can't believe I'm about to say this. The first team we're going to be talking about, all right, in the offseason, previewing for the 2024 season is the Arizona Wildcats. Yes, I'm talking about those Arizona Wildcats, 10-3 Arizona Wildcats with Jedd Fisch. Jedd Fisch is gone. Insert Brent Brennan. And if you haven't already, check out our Brent Brennan video. We did a whole thing on that when he got hired. Moral of the story is it's a pretty dang good hire. It's a pretty dang good hire. And you know what? The staff that he put around him is very reputable. Am I wrong in saying
Let's
that?
let's get into the staff right now. I mean, starting first of all, Brent Brennan, let's give him his flowers, right? He comes over from San Jose State after 7 years there, right? 3 bowl games, which by the way does not sound, super impressive. But if you're not plugged into San Jose State or you're not plugged into Mountain West, that is super, super impressive, right? He was the 2020 Mountain West champions, right? I know it was COVID year, but they had it worse than maybe, most schools that they were also playing against with the California rules as well. And yeah, he is incredible. It's kind of a late hire. If you can remember, so much has happened. If you can remember back to January, right? You had a couple different, Matthew did a short on it. You had some domino effect there with the Nick Saban leaving. And so you had obviously Kalen DeBoer come from Washington to go to Alabama. And then that Washington job opens up. Jedd Fisch comes from Arizona to Washington to go to the Big Ten, believe it or not. And then Brent Brennan comes from San Jose State to Arizona. And a lot happened. Arizona was coming off building a fantastic season in 2023 when they went 10-3 and did a lot of things with Fafita and a couple other young guys. And it was a pretty, I don't want to say doomsday, but it was scary, very volatile time to be an Arizona Wildcat fan. And Brent Brennan kind of righted the ship. He brought back a couple players. He put together a really good staff, which
Oh,
we can get
yeah.
into right now.
Oh, yeah. Well, let me bring up Dino Babers, right? So he hires Dino Babers as the offensive coordinator, and you probably remember him. Oh, wait, he coached so he coached at Syracuse, right? And you're gonna look at this staff, and we're gonna talk about guys, it's kind of the graveyard of coaches that actually recently got fired this past year. But he runs the veer and shoot offense, right? And that stemmed from Art Briles at Baylor, right? If you remember how effective that offense was, and there were a bunch of coaches that kind of came off that tree. directly the first branch of that tree is Dino Babers,
Yep.
right? And when we talk about really good offensive coordinators in college football, right, we also talk about Sean Lewis, right? Sean Lewis comes from the Dino Babers tree of Art Briles. So if you don't believe that Dino Babers can coach offense, uh, you can go listen to another podcast. All right, you can just hang up, hang out, whatever you want. All right,
And
Dino
by the way,
Babers.
you're going to look at the numbers real quick to interrupt you. You're going to look at the numbers this past season for Syracuse. It was awful. The injuries they dealt with at the quarterback
Oh
position.
yeah,
It was not reflective of Dino Babers as a coach, as a scheme, as a play caller, all this other stuff. And also at Bowling Green. Bowling Green, he
yeah,
was so good. 18-9. 18-9
yeah.
in 2 years at Bowling Green. Holy
The same
cow. And
the same thing happened to Nick Sheridan at Indiana when Kalen DeBoer was at Indiana, right? He was the offensive coordinator there with the historic season with Michael Penix in 2020. He goes to Fresno State to be the head coach there. Nick Sheridan comes up as the offensive coordinator, and they have the worst historical season by an offense in Indiana history, right? And that, or one of them, right? There are plenty of them, but and then look, he's now the offensive coordinator at Alabama, right? So like, just because there was a bad season that had injuries, right? Around like Gadsden went down, some of the offensive line went down. Uh, Garrett Schrader was not healthy the entire year. There was just so much that happened. That's not to take away anything of Dino Babers, but I say let's just
and
keep talking about the offense a little bit and like some of these pieces that Dino Babers is
wait,
working with.
can I throw real quick with Dino Babers before we move on from him? He was also, if you are, I don't want to say seasoned, but let's call it veteran and gritty, right? Passionate college football fan. If you're 1995 to 2000, he was back at Arizona. He was wide receiver, running back, offense coordinator for a little bit, and then he went to Eastern Illinois and he coached Jimmy Garoppolo. All right, the Jimmy Garoppolo, and molded him into a really good quarterback, which he looks to do with Fafita.
That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. So you're gonna see a lot of blend of like that veer and shoot, RPOs, yada yada yada. It's gonna be awesome. Okay. And Noah Fafita might be the guy to captain it all. We're talking about one of the better quarterbacks for sure in the Big 12. And we have just a sample size of last year. Jaden Delore goes in the season starting. Uh, I believe I don't think did he get hurt in that game, and then they put in Fafita, and then he took over. Either way, however it happened, no Fafita came in and was fantastic. He was fantastic. If he plays that Mississippi State game, they win that game.
Yeah.
And you know, then you're talking about not necessarily being. They wouldn't have been in the college football playoff conversation, but man, like uh what do you call it? A 10-2 regular season looks a lot different than a 9-3. So crazy, crazy stuff there. But so that's just like the quarterback situation there. Obviously, like it's a very, very, very solid one to be in, right? And that's the name that you're worried about. Okay. They have some other talent there as well, but Noah Fafita is your guy. In running back room, you're looking at, a guy, Quali Conley, right, who was there at Arizona, had some production there, but
He was at San Jose
big
State.
one. Sorry, San Jose State, but he's with Brent Brennan, is what I meant to say. Running back room also includes Shakrori Croskett Merritt, who came from New Mexico. If you remember, he was committed to Ole Miss, and now he flipped over to Arizona. He was a 1,000-yard rusher for New Mexico in that offense with Bryant Vincent. Is that right?
New Mexico. Yeah. Would have been Prime Vincent. And
And
also,
Bryant
by the
Vincent.
way, talking about that staff that Brendan put together and the connections just in the running back room itself, Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt, New Mexico. His head coach is the now special teams coordinator, Danny Gonzalez for
Yeah.
Arizona. So there's that piece coming together. And the running back coach you're bringing over, right? Brent Brennan's bringing him from San Jose State to Arizona, who developed obviously Kyrie Robinson, stud last year for San Jose State, but he also has that familiarity with Quali Conley. And to me, if you see, your head coach and your position coach bringing over a player, right, that you had experience with, that had playing time and legit value for your team, that to me is a really good sign and bodes well for this room and this offense.
Yeah. Well, you saw Jonah Coleman get kind of poached from
Yep.
Arizona and Washington. So there was a need in that offense for a running back, and you do need to have a good one, believe it or not. Jordan Washington was also another one that got poached over to Washington. So you needed a running back, and I think they got two really good ones. I really like
Yeah.
what they have there. At receiver is kind of where their golden jewel is in Ted McMillan, right? Ted McMillan is easily one of the best receivers in the Big 12 in college football. He is phenomenal. He was great last year. Him and Noah Fafita have a very special connection. For me, to me, I have him as a top three receiver in the country, and I don't think that's not even a hot take, right?
No. Do 6'5", 210. I mean, oh my gosh. So much production for 2 years. He is unguardable. He's just about unguardable, right? He is really, really good. And he has shined in a pretty crowded room with other NFL players, right? You've got Jacob Cowing, who just went to the draft this year. Dorian
Yeah.
Singer's over at Utah. He'll be a draft guy this year, who we'll talk about them and in Utah once we get to Utah in this thing. But to put McMillan also, he's battling injured right now, which is kind of tough. I mean, you hope that he's back, and I'm kind of assuming, I think we're both kind of going with this, that he will be full 100%. And obviously, predicting injuries or trying to figure out and learn from these college head coaches is just about near impossible. But the reality is, there's a little bit concern in the back of your mind if you're an Arizona fan. But I think I'm not inside or anything, but I do think, feel like reading the tea leaves, it should be okay.
Well, I'll talk about the other receivers in that room as well. Montana Lamonius Craig, right, from Colorado, was a solid player for them last year. If you remember early on in the season, he did very well. The spring game, he was fantastic
Yeah.
as well. So he does his thing there at Colorado. He says, I'm going to move out. He goes to Arizona where there's an immediate opportunity, right? That was that was last before last year, right? So this past year, he was pretty good for Arizona. But I think he's ready to take that next jump, and he's balling to ball out in his final season of college football. The
Yeah.
other good receiver that I really would like to point out is a new transfer from Old Dominion. There was a lot of hype for a different Old Dominion transfer uh, throughout the transfer portal window, and I think people forgot about Raymelo Murphy, and I think this staff really likes what they got here. He had about 500 yards for them in 2023. I guess the interesting connection there, and I can't say that this was for sure. Like, I'm assuming Brent Brennan knew him beforehand because he is originally from San Jose, California, which is something interesting to point out. So I think those three are going to kind of make up your core. You also got Malachi Riley, who's just a young true sophomore there, who's also pretty talented. But I think those three guys, to me, are probably the guys that are going to stand out. But uh, we'll see how that plays out.
Can I throw one more name in there? Speaking of guys returning to or connection to the San Jose area, right? Jeremiah Patterson. He's a wide receiver, JUCO kid that comes over as a junior, right? He is from City College of San Mateo, which, by the way, is about, I don't know, half hour from San Jose State University. He had offers from Kansas State, San Jose State, and Brent Brennan, UNLV, among others, right? He was one of four players who we'll talk about once we get to those positions. Three of those guys were on the defensive side from City College San Mateo to come over in this first, recruiting transfer portal class with Brent Brennan. And he had 90 in 2 seasons, he had 90 receptions, 1,100 yards, 15 touchdowns. He's a pretty good player. And obviously, it's nice you don't have to rely on him as like a reliable, every down, third down, it's got to be him. He's got other players that are ahead of him, but he can kind of ease his way into the Big 12 footing and make a splash play here or there for Arizona.
Yeah, well, let's talk about the offensive line now. I mean, you lose Jordan Morgan to the NFL. This is still a pretty dang good offensive line. You're returning four guys. You're returning maybe two guys that are potential NFL players. And then also at the left tackle, replacing Jordan Morgan, Raymond Polito, right?
Yep, yep, yep,
Who's
yep.
very, very interesting. Again, I guess I don't know if he'll start there. My guess is that he's going to start there. I'm assuming there'll be a position battle there for sure going into the summer. But I mean, he was a highly rated recruit. He was committed to Alabama, and then he flipped over to Arizona pretty late there. So look, there's one thing I know is that Alabama can recruit pretty good offensive linemen, right? So the fact that Arizona was able to land that is dang impressive. Um, yeah, Michael Wooten also is an interesting player to look out for at tackle. I'm assuming he'll also be competing for that spot as well, if not providing some solid depth. And then just uh, Yeah, I mean, also Raymond Paludo, I forgot to mention, is just kind of battled injuries since he's been on campus, so that's part of the reason why he hasn't played, and you haven't heard that name. But yeah, and then the interior, like, can those guys on the interior make another jump? I thought they were pretty good last year, but can they? There's some pretty decent interior defensive lines in the Big 12. I will give it some credit there. Can those guys get a push? Is the question, and give this run game an opportunity with these running backs to really thrive.
Well, yeah, and that O-line coach they're bringing in, right? Brendan's bringing him over from San Jose State. That's Josh Oglesby, right? They did average 5.58 yards per carry in
Yeah, they
2023
did.
there. I
Yeah,
know
they
it's the
did.
Mountain West. I know that, but it's also the talent that you were playing with at San Jose State. It's maybe not as what it is elsewhere in the Mountain West, but also if you got couple experienced guys and you infuse that with some young talent like Pulido, Wendell Moe, who was pretty good last year. Um, yeah, I
Josh
mean, I
Josh
think that's
Baker, Leif.
Baker's old guy, Mankinson, and then I mean, we haven't even talked about, and I'm gonna butcher his name, Jonas Savianea. Uh, it's year 3 now with him. He's got a ton of experience. He's an all Pac-12 type player at right tackle for you, so you feel pretty good at that position. And overall, offensively, before we move on to the defense, I mean, this is considering everything that happened, and you lose a couple guys here and there to the portal. I mean, this is a pretty good job for Brent Brennan and a pretty good situation that they're walking into the Big 12, where you've got a bunch of other good quarterbacks, a bunch of other good offenses, good running backs, receiving cores, blah, blah, blah in the Big 12. I mean, you're coming in and you got just as good, if not better, lineup than most of the teams that you're going to be playing.
Absolutely. Well, and then so Brent Brennan on the defensive side of the ball, he hires Dwayne Akina. Okay. Dwayne Akina is no slouch. All right. He's not. What also is nice too is, believe it or not, Arizona actually kept a large part of this defensive unit together. And just like Johnny Nansen did, right? Dwayne Akina is going to be running a 4.25 for this Arizona team. So I would imagine not a Giants philosophy shift right there. Um, I mean, I think Johnny Nansen at Texas, is he not going to be running a 4.25 with the boys over there? Either way, I think we're going to be looking at a nice and easy shift over there. I mean, you're looking at a pass rush that's really interesting because they brought in like a ton of guys there. I'm not sure if we're going to see one of those guys at least really stand out, but it was clearly a problem, right? And I would say that the biggest hole in this team is probably that defensive line, right? Maybe that interior, right? Because you lose Savea, right, to Texas, who was a huge reason, along with, Jacob Manu and the linebacking core. They're a huge reason that that defense was so good against the run, and why they were able to just camp out on third downs, and that secondary just kind of feasted. So I'll say the defensive line is probably my biggest issue with this defense. I don't know. What are your thoughts on this?
It's just a bunch of transfers. I mean, I'm looking at what 7 transfers, a Chuco guy coming in from San Mateo, like I talked about earlier. You're getting a mix of Power Five, couple, FCS, and then San Jose State as well. So Trey Smith, you feel good about, right? If you're bringing over a guy that had production for you last year, 8 sacks a year ago at San Jose State, you feel pretty good about what he can do. Maybe the adjustment to the Big 12 might take a couple games and whatnot. But you got to feel that that staff at least has some confidence in him to be able to play with the Big 12. But yeah, I think you nailed it absolutely on the head. You got a couple guys that were key contributors to last year's team that are gone. You got to replace, and you kind of plug in some transfers. To me, I mean, that's never a good recipe if you are relying on
No.
your whole defensive line. I get it's a new staff, I get that absolutely, but to rely on a whole new staff to tape together some pieces for you. And we'll see. I mean, who knows, right? It's going to be really tough to say what happens either way, but the feeling right now is it could be one of the reasons that holds the teams back from accomplishing their goals this year. Does that make sense?
Oh, I agree. I agree. The linebacking core is really good, right? Jacob Manu was first team All Pac-12. I mean, and he had 35 quarterback pressures playing stand-up linebacker, so he was everywhere in the backfield, especially. So Justin Flo, also, if you remember, he was a kind of a crazy recruit coming out of high school, but he went to Oregon, didn't really work out from there. He's all right. He's a good
He's
football
just
player.
got to stay healthy, and the
Yeah,
talent is there. It's stay healthy, and I think playing next to a guy. So you look at Mono and Flo, right, who are probably going to be your two starters, maybe Tay Brown if he takes a step in year two, but like Mono is 5'11", 225, right? Good, gritty, Big 12 college linebacker with a pro potential. Maybe might not be there because of that size limitation, but he's going to be in the right spots, right? And he's just a good Big 12 experienced linebacker there for you. Flo is, he is what you picture to be a legit linebacker, right? He's 6'2", 225. He wears it super well. He moves. He's physical. I mean, everyone's seen his highlight. That's not everyone's, but if you haven't, his highlights in high school, you've probably seen them, just not realized it was Justin Flo. But I think it'll be a nice pairing for those two. I think Flo being next to a guy with the experience and leadership of Mono, it can kind of let him do his thing in this new defense. I guess not new, but a new defense coordinator system, I guess, for him with Dwayne Aquina. And Danny Gonzalez, by the way, also special teams coordinator. I believe he's going to be also coaching the linebackers. And so that gives you even more experience on that staff, which is, credit to Brent Brennan for doing that.
seriously. And then the secondary, I like it, depending on who that second corner is going to be, right? So Davis, we know, is
Oh, yeah.
really solid in that cornerback one spot. And you don't really hate the safeties either. You don't really hate the safeties, but like of these transfer guys, right? Is it John O'Price, the JUCO transfer, Marcus Groves Killebrew, who came from A&M, then Louisville, or is it Demetrius Freeney? Like, if one of those guys can step up and play that cornerback spot at an effectively high level, like we could see a pretty special secondary here, I think.
Yeah. And by the way, I keep mentioning, I know it's not really a huge deal, but I keep mentioning College San Mateo, right? That's John O'Price and Demetrius Freeney. I mean, John O'Price comes from 2023. He was at JUCO college there. Freeney was in 2022, was at San Mateo. He transferred out to Miami, didn't quite put it together there, but had a really, really nice JUCO season. Obviously led to him being a highly recruited and sought after out of the portal. And yeah, like you said, question marks, not a lot of experience to be thrown on the shoulders of these guys, but
No,
at least they're
and
gonna.
injuries in the case of Marcus Groves Killebrew.
Yeah,
So
dude. At least, I mean, Chip Viney, right? A guy that follows Brennan. That's going to be the cornerbacks coach for them this year. They last year they had a pretty good defense. They were first in pass defense, 12 interceptions uh, by his or by the defense, right? Defensive unit. So you feel pretty good there coaching wise. But these guys, the opposite, Davis, they're going to see targets, right? You're not going to throw at 6'4", 195 stud, one of the better cornerbacks in the Big 12 when you've got these new and unproven guys. And I'm not going to say that they're not going
yeah,
to step up to the occasion, but the reality is you're going to see targets and you're going to know pretty quickly, right? If you're Arizona, right? Week 3 at Kansas State, week 5 at Utah, 6 Texas Tech, and we'll get in their schedule later on, but you're going to have to be ready to play those games if you're going to want to compete for the Big 12 race, just the way that their schedule breaks down.
well, let's talk about their schedule. All right. So you start with New Mexico, then Northern Arizona, then you go to Kansas State. You get a bye. You go to Rice Eccles. That's a tough spot. They've been there before, right? But it's a tough spot. You get Texas Tech at home, at BYU in Provo, right? You get Colorado at home, West Virginia at home, at UCF, then a bye. Then they play Houston at home, at TCU, and then Arizona State at home to finish it off, right? So wins that can kind of chalk up, for them based on their team. Arizona State, Houston, Northern Arizona, New Mexico, right? That's kind of 4.
Oh,
Okay.
Danny Gonzalez revenge game. Boom, 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 boom.
Danny Gonzalez revenge game is so right. He's gonna be pinning folks inside the 5 all day. BYU going to Provo is never easy, and this BYU team is gonna be pretty physical, I would imagine. Kalani
And
Sitake is really excited about his about sorry, I'll let you continue, but
no, real quick about that BYU game. I mean, none of these players were really, around when they were playing in the same conference, but right, it was a former the WAC, right? We talked about it in our Big 12 media. These guys were in the WAC, the border conference, and when it's got or not the border conference, that's Texas Tech. I'm sorry, BYU. and Arizona were in the whack together. Not really a rivalry game, but I guess if you want to rekindle old conference foes, just another storyline to add to the Big 12 this year.
Yeah, absolutely. I like some of the games that they get at home, right? I like the fact that they get Texas Tech at home. I like the fact that they get Colorado at home. I like the fact that they get West Virginia at home. That's a big deal this year. I think West Virginia is pretty good. So their win total is at 8, right? And you and I, for every single one of these teams, right, we're gonna pick over or under, right? Not that we're betting these games. That's for a different video. Make sure you check that out when that's out later on. But these are over under, right? You do or die. I'll tell you, it's juice to the under, believe it or not. The overall 8 win total. If that tells you kind of the direction I'm going, I'm way on the over, man. Give me over 8 wins. I now here's the thing. I think 8-4 is the most likely outcome because the schedule
Mhm.
is pretty tough because you got to go to Utah, right? You got to go to UCF. You have to play a Texas Tech's not easy. You got to go to Manhattan, right? So I do think this is not the easiest schedule in the Big 12, right? You don't get Baylor, you don't get Cincinnati, although you do get BYU, Houston, Arizona State, which is kind of nice. So if you include that, uh, also wait, isn't this Kansas State game? That's not a conference game, is it?
No,
Yeah,
that
because
you're thinking
that's
about Baylor.
no
That's
no no
Baylor and
no.
Utah.
This is also not a conference game as well. Yeah, it's not a conference game because this is leftover. This isn't the Kansas State game is not sorry a conference game.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah,
So
you're right.
when you're looking at that though, in terms of calculating whether Arizona's gonna win the Big 12, that's a different story, right? Because they don't have to play Kansas State and win that game in order to have a better chance of winning the Big 12. Now they may have to play them down the road, the championship game if they make it there, but I'm saying those are two different questions, right? So very interesting to think about. Very, very interesting to think about. So I'm gonna go ahead and take the over 8 wins. You can't you
Here's
can't push. You can't push. Got to pick over under.
well, before I give you my answer, it does scare me the dynamics of this schedule. Now, I like that you don't
Mm-hmm.
have any true back-to-back road games, right? You've got that bye in between weeks 3 and 4 at Kansas State, at Utah. But if you're telling me like your toughest games on your schedule, right, outside of Texas Tech and West Virginia, who I think are in the top half of the Big 12, I mean, at Kansas State, at Utah, at UCF, at TCU, those are teams I do not want to play on the road. Um, Especially with maybe a questionable defensive line. Although I'd be remiss if we didn't mention Kevon Darton, who comes over from Syracuse. I know Dino Babers on the other side of the ball, but at least you have some familiarity there. He could be a good player for Arizona this year. But UCF runs football well. TCU, is going to run the football well.
Mm-hmm.
BYU, Utah physicality, Kansas State with Avery Johnson and Giddens, they're gonna have to win some games. Ah, man, but this is a good team. And Brent Brennan is a good play. Oh, I'm gonna
I'll add
go.
one more. I'll add one more point. No Fafita, right? Shorter quarterbacks. You're gonna struggle when you get interior pressure, right?
Yeah.
I'm not seeing a ton of teams in this list on the schedule that are going to be able to do that. I know you talked about teams like Kansas State and Utah. I believe will be able to apply interior pressure, but other
UCF,
than that,
Lee
okay,
Hunter, John
okay, yep,
Walker.
I, yep, I guess, but really, I mean, like they could have pulled
That's a
Iowa State. They could have. I mean,
that's a
there are
great point.
other. I'm just saying. I'm just saying.
That's a great point. Yeah. Listen, I'll go over it just because I I just I think 8-4 is like an outcome, the most likeliest outcome. But if you tell me that you have a coach I trust, right, Brent Brennan, and a quarterback I trust, and Fafita, you benefit of the doubt. They're going to win these close games that are going to be on the road. Let's go. Let's go over. So 9-3, and you're looking at depending which games you win and lose, right? If it's that Kansas State game, if not, or if the other conference games, right in the thick of it, which we expect them to be right in the thick of it of Big 12 um, conference race, and then therefore the college football playoffs as well.
Let's talk about Arizona State now. Okay, we've moved from one Arizona school to the other. This is a very interesting team. This team, I mean, very much struggled last year. They went 3-9. Kenny Dillingham, it was his first year. Okay, Yeah, they struggled on both sides of the ball. I'll say less so defensively. They actually put up a fight in some games, right? And they can't exactly control their offense, turning the ball over at will and giving the defense absolutely horrendous field position to work with. Because if you actually look at the metrics, like, sure, they let up a lot of passing yards per game, but like in terms of like yards per attempt, people just threw the ball a lot on them, right? Like, because they really couldn't run the ball that well. So I kind of liked what I saw from the defense last year, given the talent and the injuries too, and the injuries. I mean, we know how good Jordan Clark was, but Jordan Clark, I believe he was fighting some injuries as well last year. So, but let's talk about the offense, right? Marcus Arroyo is in there this year. Okay, he enters the equation. He actually did wonders for that Oregon offense when he was over there in terms of creating an explosive run game. And if you're going to look at a part of Arizona State's game that needs to be very effective based on the talent in the room, your run game has to be very, very good. You have
And multiple and multiple.
so many running backs. You have so many of them. You are going to have spellback over spellback over spellback. I think the hire of Marcus Arroyo is reflective of that. I think Kenny Dillingham understands I know what Kenny Dillingham wants to do. I don't know if he can do exactly what he wants to do with the talent on this team, but I think he knows he has to run the ball well, and I think he knows that Marcus Arroyo potentially can get that done for him.
Yeah, I mean, you're looking at that offensive line with by the way, like the quarterback position. It's not that I don't like Sam Levitt. It's just he's a redshirt freshman, right? And we'll see what happens there. But yeah, you mentioned the talent there in the running back room. I mean, if Kenny Dillingham, if you're going to win football games, right, you're going to run the football this year in the Big 12, which a lot of teams are, right? Cam Scatabo, 5'10", 225
Scattaboo.
stud.
Scattaboo.
Yeah,
I just learned that.
sorry, thank you. Scattaboo, 5'10", 225 stud. DeCarlos Brooks, redshirt senior. We love that. 5'10", 220. Very nice veteran depth for you. Raleek Brown, former highly rated high school guy, 5'8",
X
185.
Factor.
Like I said, multiple.
X X Factor alert.
Let's get into it. Yeah, absolutely. And Alton McCaskill, too, by the way, who's just a couple years removed
Yeah.
from being really, really good for Houston. And obviously, the
Injuries.
true freshman, Jason Brown, probably won't play a ton, but I know Arizona State's excited about him. 5'8", 194. Love that. Um, so yeah, that like I said, I think what you mentioned, what he can do for the run game and maximize this room with all the different talents, maybe run one or two running back sets, get Raleek Brown in motion, Alton McCaskill, Cam Scatabo in the receiving game, whatever you can do to get touches to these guys and ease the life of Sam Levitt or whoever is the quarterback for you. And by the way, I'll throw in another, I'm not going to call it X factor, but wrinkle you can have Jeff Sims as another running back body,
Yep.
6'4", 220. I mean, I think the take that you're bringing in is obviously just to give veteran and another person in your quarterback room, but also like I think you plan to play him and running the football and what you can do with some wildcat packages, but also the option to throw the football as well, as assuming he holds on to the football.
Yes, and we talked about this at Big 12, our Big 12 Media Day breakdown. So I'm going to assume that not everyone who's watching this video watched that video. If you haven't, you can check that out. But we did talk about Kenny Dillingham. He explicitly said when talking about the quarterback battle, he's like, "Look, looking for a quarterback that can extend with his legs, right? But also takes care of the football." So that makes me believe that Sam Leavitt is the guy, and I think the staff likes him and the beat writers like him as well. And I've heard players in interviews talk about him as well, and they speak very highly of him. However, he was buried. I know he was young, but he's buried behind some of those Michigan State quarterbacks that are maybe not as good either. But the counterpoint to that is right. Just because the guy's young doesn't mean that he can't and won't make a step this year, right? In the right system, in the right environment, when given a chance in a game situation. Yeah, it's going to be very interesting. I mean, you don't have you're literally gone with your entire quarterback room from last year. It's all gone.
Yeah.
Trayson
Well,
Bourget,
well I thought Porsche is still there.
no, he's gone. See ya.
Damn.
See ya. You know where he's at actually? Trayson Bourget is over at um Dang it. I've got it somewhere. Is it Baylor? Nope. Dang it. Come back to me. I'll figure it out. Oh, he's at BYU. Duh. He's at BYU with Jake Retzlaff and Gary Bohannon. And he's not even going to start there. So
Oh
that's
wow, you're right. That's crazy. I didn't even realize that. Okay.
yeah, that's crazy. So yeah, very, very interesting quarterback room there. Yeah, quarterbacks need receivers to throw to. I don't know if you wanted to talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you got Xavier Guillory, right? The guy used to was at I believe Idaho State. He
Mm-hmm.
was a guy. I mean, this room it was a tough year offensively for you guys, right? I mean, Elijah Badger's gone, right? Jalen Connor's gone, right? Those are guys that were pretty good for you. Cam Scatabo was your third leading receiver at 286 yards. He's a running back, all right, which is fine. I mean, it was kind of in and out of lineup with the quarterback position. You had a true freshman that you were kind of acclimating when he was healthy in Jaden Rashada. But yeah, you got Guillory, you got Troy Omiere, former Texas guy that 200 plus yards last year for you, three touchdowns as well. Melquan Stovall as well. Jake Smith, a guy that's there now who's former high recruitment at, Notre Dame, Texas, USC, all around. Jordan Tyson, he's there. It's, I'm not going to say it's thin, but in terms of proven production, I think you got a lot of bodies in there that they don't mind throwing out there. But like you said, in terms of the, um, the makeup of this offense is going to be through the run game. And if these guys,
It
as much as I
has
hate
to
to say
be.
it,
It has to
can you
be.
run block? Right, you bring over Malik McCain, ugh, Malik McClain, right from IMG, right was also at Penn State and Florida State, 6'4", 206. Get him out there and block, right? Run some go routes. I
Mm,
mean, you can find ways to use these guys, and I think that Arroyo and Dillingham will. But if you're talking about strengths of the offense, it's not going to be the wide receiver room.
definitely not. And when we talk about the run game being really effective, a rather important aspect of that is the offensive line, which was kind of decimated last year from injuries. I'll let you touch on the offensive line. What are your thoughts on this offensive line going into next year?
It's not ideal. I mean, what Max Inácio, right, former JUCO guy at right tackle. We'll see. Sean Nana, right, as he's a guy like young kid, St. John Bosco. Obviously you're still gonna have some growing pains like he did last year, but I think he could step in the right direction this year. Ben Coleman's the guy that's been there for a while now, or I'm sorry, been in college football a while now, former Cal guy.
Leigh
You like him,
Fontaine,
Leigh Fontenot at center. Yeah,
I like
fine
him. I
player.
think I think he's fine.
Yeah, he was pretty good for you last year. And then Josh Atkins is the transfer that comes in from Houston, right? A fellow Big 12 school as well. We'll see. I do think your starting, your first five are, doable and definitely manageable. And I think with the ground and pound style that you're going to be playing, that helps. The depth definitely concerns me, but you've got some bodies on this team, at least depth wise, that aren't freshmen and sophomores and guys that
Yes.
you don't necessarily feel. You've got juniors, you've got seniors, grad students, right? And so at least you feel um, with like 4 years in the weight room, whatever it may be, a little bit more reliable than what you had last year.
Yeah, certainly. And I will say though, there's some decent defensive lines on their schedule. A couple of them. Not a ton, but a decent amount. And some teams that have effectively stopped the run in the past. Does that necessarily mean they're going to stop the run this year? I don't know. We'll see if Arizona State can accomplish running the ball. That's just going to be their biggest key. Like, because it's not going to be an explosive offense. It won't be, right? It's going to be, they're going to have to be physical and they're going to have to find ways to scheme open running lanes and block. That's really it offensively. That's going to be their key. And I would hope that Arizona State fans agree with us. If you don't, let me know. Like, are there receivers that we're sleeping on that like? Because I'm not at these spring practices. I'm not at these summer workouts. So if y'all have any sleepers for us, just let us know in the comments. But CD, you
Give
got
one.
one?
How about the tight end position? I'm sorry, I didn't talk about them.
Oh,
Shaman Metayer, right? It's like I like him, right? 6'5", 245. I think he's a nice receiving threat for you. He comes in from Colorado this offseason, but last year he was playing for Cincinnati. I thought he was one of the lone bright spots in that offense, and I do think a change of scenery was necessary for him. And I thought Colorado was a perfect spot for him to go. But I guess they're gonna run 4 or 5 wide there this year. So I guess he's the boots out there. Whatever happened there, I do think Ken Dillingham looks around his playmakers, at least throwing the ball this year. And Mateer is a nice ad for you.
I agree. Let's move over to the defensive side of the ball, where Brian Ward, I thought he did what he could last year, right? He did what he could. I thought it was, I'll call it a sneaky decent defense. I'm not gonna call it sneaky good. I'm gonna call it sneaky decent. And a huge part of the reason why it was good, BJ Green was awesome, man. He was
Yeah,
so
man.
good.
Yep, he
And
was.
unfortunately, he is transferred to a different team inside of the conference. But the reality is, I think you still have some guys that can maybe get to the quarterback. I think a huge, huge X factor that has to perform this year is a guy like Clayton Smith, right? Former 5-star recruit at Oklahoma. And he was banged up for most of the year last year, but then he really showed out at the end of the year. Okay. If he is very good, I think he can maybe take some of that production that is lost with BJ, because BJ Green was an all Pac 12 player. He was the only player on Arizona State that was all Pac 12. So we'll see. CJ Fight, I think, is another one, the sophomore defensive tackle. That's kind of a guy that I think needs to really show improvement and needs to make an impact in the middle there.
Yeah, no, you mentioned it. I mean, Smith's the guy. We'll see what happens. Prince Deborah, right? 6 sacks last year.
Dorba, yeah. Yeah,
Deborah, pretty good for
he's
you.
he's good.
You had some depth with Roman Petre from Purdue coming in. Jamon Tapp, right, former high recruit from Texas, which is nice. You bring in another Texas guy, Zach Swanson. Didn't get much playing time there, but also a former 4-star guy there. A little bit on the younger side, which is nice for the long term, the future of Arizona State defensively. But
There's a lot
it's
of
again,
bodies.
but you're bringing in 6 transfers, which is
This is
great that you can do that. But
yeah.
to me, it's also like concerning where it's like you obviously had a need and you filled them, and we'll see, what plays out here. Does Jacob Rich Kamanga, does he take a step? We'll see. Um, Coming over from in-state Arizona, right? He was, I guess, okay for them last year, but I don't know. To me, I'm a little bit skeptical in what they can be in that front line there.
Yeah. We'll talk about skeptical. We move over to the linebacking core, right? I mean, Travion Brown is a loss. Okay. They're bringing
Yeah.
Keyshawn Elliott, comes from New Mexico State. Cyrus Fiasu comes from San Diego State. It just, to me right now, this looks like a G5 room. I like early on, I need to see these guys play at a high level and affect the game, because Lord knows Arizona State needs some players to really step up on this team, some new pieces. And these guys all have opportunities, man. They have opportunities in front of them, and they really have a chance. Uh, you got a really tough schedule. You have a chance to shine, I think, in this linebacker spot. My guess is that Keyshawn Elliott and Cyrus Fiasu start. I don't know if you have a different opinion on that.
Yeah. The only
Caleb
silver lining, I
McCullough,
guess, or if you want to talk glass half full, I mean, last year, obviously, yeah, you had Trey Brown. It's pretty good for you. But last year, you do have some returning production in Caleb McCullough, right? In Tate Romney, right? Romney was a young kid that was forced in there last year. Caleb
Brooke,
McCullough's a veteran guy as well. Uh, so at least you've bringing in competition to make an attempt to raise the ceiling of your room at the linebacker position. But to be honest, is like, and I played linebacker right in high school. Like you do not want to battle a defensive line in front of you. Like you want those defensive linemen, you want them to make your life easier. And if you're, maybe a questionable or at least a younger, inexperienced at the Big 12 level, if you're talking about Elliott and Fiasau, right? You want production and eating up blocks and being in the right spots and moving guys on the defensive line. And not that it won't happen, but it's just like I talked about earlier, like a little bit skeptical. Can it happen? And especially early on in the season when you're playing winnable games like Mississippi State, right? At Texas State on a Thursday, right? Those are games that you maybe you're not favoring against Mississippi State, but the reality is you could still beat them potentially, or at least you'd like to, and you're gonna have to figure this out early on.
So one room that I'm actually like shocked I might like this year is the secondary. I don't love it. I don't love it. I think Cole Martin has a chance to be good. I'm very worried about um he'll play nickel, right? But I'm really worried about the cornerback position. I will say I'm not so worried about the safeties. I don't think Kamari Wilson hasn't even gotten to campus yet. Is that right? But
Um,
or maybe
yeah,
he recently got the camp. I don't know. But so he might be a little bit behind on the eight ball there in terms of, learning that defense. But Simmons played very well last year at that
he's
safety spot, but it's pretty good.
he's
But
probably your
like,
best player defensively, right? I mean, 73 tackles last year, and
yeah.
I throw his running mate in there too. I guess
Well, no,
future
BJ
running
Green
mate.
was probably their best player last
Oh,
year defensively.
I'm sorry.
But
Yeah,
but you're right
this
though.
year, this year,
Oh, this year, yeah, I would say so. I would say
definitely. But
so.
I
Unless like guy like Clayton Smith,
that would
steps
be
up.
awesome.
That would be
That'd be
awesome.
awesome. But Xavier Alford, he's a guy that you might forget about. He was pretty good for USC back in 2021, but he missed 2022 with an injury, right? He had to sit out 2023 because of a two-time transfer rule, I believe, right? So, I mean, yes, he might be a little bit rusty to begin with. He hasn't played in 2 years, 3 years now in 2024, but at least he's got some experience in that room to pair with Simmons and maybe buy time until you can develop and really unleash Kamari Wilson in your safety room. But yeah, I mean your cornerback room is what happens when you lose Rotorn to the NFL, Ed Woods to Michigan State. Like you're gonna in year two of Dillingham, it's kind of brutal.
Look,
And
I
Terrence Welch, we'll see, former high recruit. But if he was not good
look.
enough to play last year,
That's what
that
I'm
that
saying.
that room
Like,
was terrible.
be very like Arizona State fans. I know y'all are very optimistic on LT Welsh, and he was a good get for y'all. Like, not gonna lie, like that's a developmental guy for sure. Just be very careful, all right? Like, on expecting early production from a guy like him. I caution you to tread lightly with that.
Javon Robinson's a guy I would be more optimistic about, even though he's a little bit younger, or I guess the same grade. He's redshirt his freshman year. But he comes over from Washington State with a connection to Brian Ward, your defensive coordinator, was recently at Washington State before he came over here just 2 years ago. And so at least you have got some connection there. I got Keith Abney, right? Your sophomore guy. But yeah, it's defensively for Arizona State. You have a lot of bodies. You bring a lot of transfers. You kind of throwing a bunch of stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks. And hopefully you hit on some of these transfers or you hit on some pieces here and there, and you can put together a pretty formidable defense. But as we stand right now in July, it would be, it's not something I'm going to be predicting or I'm really going to be counting on this year for Arizona State.
Yeah, let's talk about their schedule. Thank God they have Wyoming at home. Now, it
Oh
probably wasn't
my
gonna matter too
God.
much because they're gonna be running the ball a ton, but thank God they do not have Wyoming on the road because this schedule, it's pretty brutal. And they don't get to play themselves. I'm sorry. That's part of it. That's part of it. Wyoming, Mississippi State, Texas State. That's
On
your
the
out of
road in
conference.
San Marcos, bro.
That is your out of conference. That is so brutal. And then here's who you draw, right? You miss you or no, you don't miss Utah. Here's who you get in the Big 12. Texas Tech, Kansas, Utah, Oklahoma State, UCF, Kansas State, Arizona.
It
The
is
only one that you missed,
brutal.
really, the only two that you missed were Iowa State and TCU, and instead you got BYU and
Maybe West
Cincy.
Virginia too, but
Yeah,
no,
yeah,
thank you.
maybe. Like,
Here's what I'll say
what a
too.
brutal schedule. That's why the win total's at 4.5, right? This is probably a 5, 6 win team. That schedule is just brutal.
Last year started out rough too, right? You had the close game against Southern Utah. You lost to Oklahoma State, blown out by Fresno State, and then you got into conference play and you lost to some teams that maybe you could have beaten with Colorado and California. But then you got into the meat and potato of it with Washington, Washington State, Utah, UCLA, Oregon, Arizona, and they actually won 2 games in that stretch. But the optimism here, if you start to schedule, you know, 2-5, maybe, that's not good. Maybe 3-4, right? But teams that you on your schedule, like to me, that Cincinnati game is killer. At Cincinnati, you would love to play them at home, right? And it's kind of brutal. I think the at Texas State is hilarious. I think they genuinely could lose that game on a Thursday, right? In week
Yes.
3.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And that could be a week
Absolutely.
after you lose to Mike Levy in his first year at Mississippi State. And then you got to go play Joe McGuire at Texas Tech. But you get a bye to regroup. But oh wait, you're playing Kansas and Utah. And
Yeah.
it does
And
not
if
get easier from there with yeah.
and if I remember correctly, Texas State was top 3 in the country last year in tackles for loss, and their defensive line is still pretty good. So that is scary. That is scary if you ask me. But yeah, the win total is at 4.5. It's juiced to the under. I'm gonna lay. Well, I'm not gonna lay it, but I'm gonna ride with the juice in terms of picking it. Right. I'm gonna go with the under 4.5. I think they go 4-8. It's not gonna fall off like it did last year. Like they had some injuries and they just were not deep enough in that first year to handle injuries. I think they're more handled to or more equipped to handle injuries this year. I just don't think they're gonna find a way to get to 5 or 6 wins with this schedule. It's just that brutal.
Yeah, I'm with you here. I'm going to take the under. And I do want to separate, this season from the future of the program, which I do believe in. I do believe in Kenny Dillingham.
Correct. Yes.
Absolutely. The reality is you kind of got hit in the transfer portal, right? Maybe later than you thought you would with Ed Woods and I believe BJ Smith were both, and the wide receiver too. Were all three of those guys, Elijah Badger, were in that second cycle in the spring, and there were not a lot of good pickings out there for schools like Arizona State to be had, and so you couldn't really recover from that, and you're seeing that in some weak spots on your team, on your roster, and again with the tough schedule, the grinding of it, the tough away games it's going to be tough. And now here's the thing. I do think this team might be better than last year. They won 3 games last year. Maybe could have won a couple more, but the program's heading in the right direction, right? They're getting their stuff together, athletic department wise. They're recruiting better with Dillingham. But I think we are a year away from really, leaping into bowl and then actually being, a tough team for people to play in the Big 12 and pushing themselves to the upper half of the Big 12.
Let's move on. Let's talk about Baylor. Baylor's an interesting spot because, Dave Aranda, whether or not he should be fired, he is, in most people's eyes, on the hot seat, right? It's crazy. He won a Big 12 championship just a couple years ago.
Not long ago.
And I'll say this. I like the Jake Spavital hire,
Yeah.
and it's been having a fantastic impact on the recruiting trail. I mean, you just land Taz Williams, who you were fighting some top schools for. I mean, I know some places he's a 3-star, but that's a guy that could move up in those rankings pretty easily. Ja'Cory Watson, another receiver that they recruited. Cade Knighton, a good running back. I mean, I think I think Jake Spavital is doing a fantastic job on the recruiting trail, but that does not necessarily translate to the field. However, I think Jake Spavital is a good offensive coordinator. He's done it before several times in several different places. So that offense is going to include an interesting quarterback situation where you have Uh, Daquan Finn, a highly touted after transfer from Toledo, who's battling out with Sawyer Robertson, who was there before, who started some games because of the Blake Shapen injury. He was not very good, despite what the staff telling us how good he was leading up to it. Yeah, and it just Baylor just kind of fell apart, man, last year. They were not very good. They ranked 94th in points per game offensively. They ranked 122nd in points per game allowed defensively. They allowed 35 points per game last year. That's wild. And they played
For Dave
Utah.
Aranda.
Utah was on their schedule, by the way. That's Nate Johnson, Bryson Barnes, Utah. So,
And
I
they
mean,
should have won that game
they
too. If you're a Baylor fan, you remember that game. That was brutal. And that was a
yeah,
week after losing and getting, torched by TJ Finley in Texas State, who, by the way, did that to a lot of teams last year. So don't feel too bad.
what a guy. So the quarterback room, I feel good about Daquan Finn, right? Very athletic. I think Jake Spavital can do some things with Daquan Finn. The running back room, I also feel great about. I really like Dominic Richardson. I
Yep.
really like Richard Reese.
Mm-hmm.
And I really like Dawson Pendergrass.
Amen. Pair
Not
and a
to mention
spare.
a pair and a spare. All guys that got significant carries last year. Now you move into the wide receiver room, and I know they tried to do some stuff to fix this, and I think it's fine. CD really likes the wide receiver room. I can see from his face. I love Ashton Hawkins. I'll say that. And I do like Katron Jackson. But what are your
Yeah,
thoughts on the rest of the folks there?
it did not look great last year. And I think a lot of that, it mutually, right? The receiving room was not great last year. The production, the drops, all that other stuff. But Blake Shapen and Sawyer Robertson really struggled, right? I think you bring in Jake Spavital, you bring in Daquan Finn, who I'm presuming to be the starter. If he loses the job, that means Sawyer Robertson beat him out, and that means he took a really serious step and maybe turned back into the fall camp hero that he was a year ago. And we'll see what happens on the field. But to me, I look for this unit to take a step, right? Keyshawn Jackson's a guy where like Hal Prez's a guy I really like. I mean, you have five seniors in this room that all return. I guess three top seniors return, plus Ashton Hawkins, a guy we really love, explosive, right? GJ Kennedy, a guy that Baylor saw week one in Texas State. And obviously, I must have liked him enough to get him in the portal. And then Jamal Bell from Nevada. We'll see what he can do as a fifth-year guy. And then Monterey Baldwin returning as a speedster, 16.4 yards per catch. I really like that. To me, this is one of the reasons why I'm optimistic on this room or on this offense, because yes, you've got the running back room we feel pretty good about. We'll see how the O-line looks. I think it'll be better this year. I think they can run the football, but I do think pushing the ball down the field, using these playmakers that they have out wide will help them develop more consistency overall as an offense.
Michael Trigg.
Yeah. How about that? Now, it's been a
We'll
while
see.
since we've seen Michael Trigg, the,
We'll
the
see.
Michael Trigg. But I guess Kesley Johnson comes back and he wasn't like what third string tight end last year. But Michael Trigg's an interesting guy. And again, another guy with talent and tools and whatnot in this room that's Spavital can have fun with.
I want to hear your thoughts on the offensive line. So this team, I mean, they ran the ball not very well last year at all. They really did not. They lose their center, but they get pretty much all those pieces back, and then they add a couple of guys. Do you have any significant thoughts on this offensive line headed into 2024?
I like Campbell Barrington. I think he's a pretty good player for you. Um, Caden Siaraki, right? Is he going to play right tackle? Is he going to play right guard for you? I think no matter what, uh, it's fine having him in there. I like what he can do in the run game. I believe Kurt Daniker returns as well. He's a guy, or I'm sorry, he's coming in from Iowa. I'm sorry, Ohio, which is nice. He's a experienced guy in the MAC there. I I'm more on the wait and see approach. I don't think it'll be a liability, right? I think you've got six guys that maybe 6 to 7 if you're, feeling good about Gavin Byers that you feel good um throwing out there. But I guess we'll wait and see when it comes out. I do think it's better than it was last year, plain and simple. And I think it'll help. But I don't know how
Yeah.
much better. I think it's wait and see. But again, I mean, we've talked about this a little bit with Arizona and Arizona State. I mean, some of the D lines in the Big 12, I mean, they don't play UCF, right? Utah is a non-conference game, but they lose Jonah Ellis and some other guys. We'll see how much strain they have on their offense due to pressure from other teams.
Speaking of defensive lines, give us the rundown.
Yeah. Oh, well, Steve Linton, right? I mean, he's the transfer that's coming over, I believe from Texas Tech and Syracuse. Right? He was disappointed for Texas Tech, but maybe he'll find a fit with Dave Aranda. Trey Wilson returns. He's a guy that was a
Young,
true freshman last year, and he got some playing time. Didn't do a ton with it production wise, but again, yeah, like I said, he's a true sophomore this year. I mean, you feel pretty good about they trust him to play in year one, and maybe they take a next step in year two with a full off season under his belt. Looking interiorly, right? Was that Cooper Lands? Pretty good player. I mean, their defense struggled last year, right? In general,
yeah.
but I think he was one of the bright spots. I mean, what he can do defensively, for you eating some run blocks. Yeah, I
See, like
it's
I don't know if it's like they
it's wait and
missed on
see.
some. The problem is on the offensive defensive line. There's not a lot of market. Well, sorry, the market is huge for that, right? But there's not a ton of players
It's
that are
competitive, yeah.
insanely impact players, right? So it's bits and pieces. So if you don't recruit and you kind of miss on a defensive line, like you're in a tough spot, you know? I mean, we were talking about Arizona earlier, and they know that they have a defensive line issue, so they brought in a ton of guys. Baylor didn't bring in that many guys, so does that mean that they feel pretty decent about it? Uh, I mean, they allowed 188 yards per game on the ground, so they were bottom 15 in sacks, if you want to look at the pass rushing aspect. So this defensive line was pretty bad, and that's not to say that they won't get better, but it feels like they're kind of running it back with this defensive line. Am I right in that?
Yeah, yeah,
A
for the
little
most
bit?
part. Yeah, I mean, and to me, the old saying where it's like you do the same thing over and over again, expect different result is the definition of insanity, right? But sometimes like people do progress. I mean, sometimes people do adjust, like Trey Wilson, right? Maybe it takes him I guess
It's
Trevin
true.
May has been there forever, but Brennan
Brennan Bet?
Belt, right? Yeah, Brennan Belt, I'm sorry, sophomore guy as well, interiorly got his feet wet a little bit last year, had 200 some snaps, and was not terrible. So we'll see. We'll see. I think you're right though in terms of not being a bright spot, something you could be concerned about. But I do think it gets a little bit better this year with the ceiling being raised just a tad.
Yeah. At the linebacker position, you got Matt Jones. That's pretty
Baller.
good. I like experience back there. I like experience and production back there. I have no problem with that.
11 tackles for loss. That's not bad. I mean, he didn't grade out well for PFF, but I do think if you're like we talked about earlier, like if you're a linebacker and you have bad D line play, you're
You're
gonna
gonna look
struggle.
bad on film. You're gonna
You're
look
gonna look
terrible
bad.
on film because you're gonna get clipped by guard after guard after guard,
And it gets really frustrating. You're going to be out of position. You're going to be late to things.
especially playing that mic. Like you are toast
Yeah.
if guards start scraping up to you. So
Brooks Miller returns. Like he's a guy that had over 300 snaps last year. Um, so he's a senior as well, a redshirt senior as well. So you got two guys with a lot of experience in that room. So I guess maybe they can help get your D line in right spots.
Yeah.
Uh,
Where does Keaton
but
Thomas fit into that? The JUCO commit? I'd like, you know, we'll
yeah,
see if he can make an impact. It feels like, I'm not married to the idea of Brooks Miller always being that weak side linebacker spot. Uh, but we'll see. I mean, Baylor fans are probably more in tune with this and are like, nah, you're crazy. But I don't know. I don't know. I don't hate the idea of Keaton Thomas getting some time there. This might be a thing where like they kind of figure it out, and I don't know. It seems like that this could be a battle, but I do like. I'm fine with Mac Jones there at the mic.
yeah,
In terms of the secondary, I see a lot of pieces. I mean, you're the one
of
who's
sense
high
in the
on Baylor
butt.
this year. Like you're the one who's high on Baylor. You're the one who needs to convince me, right?
Okay, Caden Jenkins is a guy that I like, right? Going into year two, I think he's going to take a nice step. And he had actually a pretty
Agreed.
good year last year. 13, I'm sorry, 3 interceptions last year. Pretty good for them as a true freshman. And then behind him, you've got guys like Chateau Reed, redshirt senior, you like Tevin Williams, the junior as well. There's some bodies in there, right? But you're bringing over what, Lorando Johnson, if I'm not mistaken, uh,
Yep.
which is nice. And but to me, the really nice pieces are in your other secondary with your nickel, Carl Williams, and then your safeties, Devin Bobby and Lemire both return. That's the
Yep.
bright spot that you have. That's the things. Those are the people that are going to clean up messes that your front seven creates, and hopefully they could take advantage. Maybe be a little bit more opportunistic this season, and it'll lead to a little bit more short fields, turnovers, whatnot um, for your offense.
Okay. Well, then, what do you think about a guy like Kendrick Simpkins?
I
That's a
mean,
guy
he was
that he makes
disruptive.
lots of plays in the run game.
Yep.
Like that's a guy that plays downhill. Absolutely. So I mean, if you're talking about guys like if you're talking about running backs that are going to get to the second level because of that, not so great defensive line, which who knows, the defensive line could improve, right?
Yeah.
But say it doesn't the way that you want it to. He, you might be relying on a guy like that to just clean up, man, from Western Kentucky. The guy made a lot of physical plays over there in the CUSA.
10 TFLs, 6.5 sacks. I mean, that's pretty good from a safety position. And they'll move him around, obviously. They'll get creative as they should. DJ Coleman, too. Young kid, right? He got his feet wet a little bit last year and had some impact plays, which is nice. Popped a little bit on film. But again, it was nice about him is you don't have to play here right away. You can kind of you know, take a back seat, be here and there, focus on his game, and then he'll be a nice piece for them moving forward. But yeah, you said last year that defense, it was terrible. And for Dave Aranda, that was part of the frustrating part because that's his calling card. Like that, he was defense coordinator for a national championship winning team, and they've had good defenses there. Um, and I mean, you had Matt Powledge coming, who was a first year guy, I believe, a year ago. He's still there, and it was pretty tough. It was pretty tough, and so I think, unfortunately, the reinforcements that you're seeing them, recruit well aren't coming in just yet, right? And they're a couple years away from really being impact players for you. But yeah,
I don't think the 3-3-5 helps them.
no, yeah, because to me, what I like about 3-3-5 is I like having good defensive linemen. If you're gonna play three defensive linemen and you're not gonna get shredded on the run,
You
I
need
think you have
fast
to.
linebackers and you need
Mhm.
physical, large defensive linemen. And I don't know if they have either of those or
No,
enough. Enough. I'll say enough. But yeah, let's take a look at their schedule though. So you got Tarleton State to open up at home. You go to Rice Eccles, Utah. You get Air Force at home, at Colorado, BYU at home, at Iowa State. It's a little flip flop, flip flop. You get a bye. You go to Texas Tech, then two home games, Oklahoma State and TCU. A bye, then two road games, West Virginia and Houston. And you finish the season with Kansas at home. I'm not gonna say that's the easiest schedule by any means. You do get Houston which is nice, which is nice. You also get BYU at home, which is nice, which is nice. But don't be surprised if BYU is coming after you, man. Like we'll talk about it a little bit, but uh, Kalani Sitake's already said multiple times that he can't wait to get back to what they do offensively, and that is run the stinking ball. So, Baylor, be ready. I'm just gonna say that. Just be ready. So, and Air Force, they're gonna run the ball a ton. Like Air Force, that I know that's a different Air Force team this year, but dude, I mean, this is not an easy schedule to me, and their win total reflects that. It's at 5.5.
Yeah, to me, and the theme of the Big 12 this year is going to be 50-50 games where you've got two teams that are similar in talent, right? Playing pretty good, fun football that you're going to be enjoying as a fan. And you're going to have to win these games in the fourth quarter. And last year, you saw Baylor one too many times lose games that were right there in their grasp, right? I'm looking at Utah specifically. That was pretty tough. Iowa State, you lost by 2. Houston, you lost by 1. West Virginia, you lost by 3. You flip those results around, you're going bowling, right? In 7 wins potentially. Now, obviously, you're not going to flip all of those, but you flip a couple, you can get. I do think you can get bowling here, and I don't know if that's going to be enough to save Dave Aranda's job, right? Even though they're open on a win total is 5.5. But I'm real quick. I'm gonna spoil my pick. I'm gonna go over
Yeah.
for them. I mean, last year I also took Baylor over, and that did not work at all. But I do think the quarterback position, I do think their offense is much better suited this year to not only like take a step, but control games and control tempo of games, which I do think will help them defensively with how they're going to run the football and their depth defensively, especially on your defensive line. So you don't have to rotate as many guys, put guys in vulnerable spots so they're not huffing and puffing in that fourth quarter of games. So you can close out football games like you didn't do a year ago.
I'll take the under. Uh, I really do not believe in the defense. I really do not. And it's unfortunate because I think it's going to cost Dave Aranda his job. And by the way, I don't know what Power Five school is going to hire that guy to be his defensive coordinator, but I think there'll be plenty of opportunity for him to be a defensive coordinator. Maybe not Power Five, but I mean, I think he should be a Power Five coordinator. That's my opinion, but we'll see. We'll see if that's the case. I think if he makes a bowl game, it should be enough because I do not think this roster is where it should be, and that's part of the knock on him, right? Is that the roster is not where it should be 5 years
Chess
in,
portal. Yeah.
and he was late to that party, if you remember, and he admitted and he backed up on it, and now he's recruiting well, and I think he has a decent staff in there, so I don't know. I'm willing to wait it out with Dave Aranda, but I'm sure the boosters are not. Let's move on. Let's talk about BYU. All right. Fight Mormons. This is a team that returns a lot. Okay. They are top 35 in returning production. Um, as I said before, Kalani Sitake has been quoted saying he is looking forward to our offense being what we're used to. So I'm pretty excited about that because I think BYU can be a very physical team. Their over under win total doesn't necessarily tell you that. Their over under win total is at 4.5 this year. And, last year I thought that they were going to get really physical because they had a guy like LJ Martin, but really Aiden Robbins was the guy from UNLV who was such a big unit of mass. I'm like, they're just going to run it with this guy. That dude had 1 touchdown all year. Where is goal line carries? How is this guy not? That guy's like 230, 240 pounds. He was huge. So I'm like, man, what happened? Well, the offense just sucked. And the defense wasn't that good either. In fact, it was not great. I mean, you could argue that the secondary was pretty good, but we'll get to that. All right. The offense. What do you lose? You lose Keaton Slovis. You add Gary Bohannon. Okay. Jake Retzlaff, who has some experience starting. Okay. And then Trayson Bourget, now who we mentioned earlier. So my money's on Jake Retzlaff to be the starting quarterback there. Is that what you're leaning towards, or do you like Gary Bohannon enough?
I like Bohannon if he can get
Okay.
healthy, right? if he's
Yeah,
coming off an injury, right? But what he did at Baylor a couple years ago was pretty nice. And obviously,
a couple years
USF,
ago.
yes, USF did not work out for him, but that was also injury and the reality that Byron Brown's a stud, right? And good for Brown and USF there. But yeah, I like Bohannon here. I don't think they brought him in just to ride the bench, and I think this is one of his last years of
Well, that's what
eligibility, so he's
USF
going to be
did.
all in.
I'm just saying.
We'll
I'm
see.
just saying.
I don't know. I do like them, but like you said, I not that it doesn't really matter, but I do think it it's going to be about running the football. So if you can take care of the football, if you can um, play action pass, if you can do things within the system of the offense, that'd be nice. And that favors a guy like Retzlaff who's been there, who's healthy, that can, have that continuity with that staff and with his receivers. But I do think Bohannon gives them like you're gonna have to make Big Ten throws to win games in the Big 12, right? This year. You're gonna have to come from behind, blah, blah, blah. It's gonna be a competitive conference. So I think Bohannon, to me, is who I'm hoping to see if I'm a BYU fan, because I think he raises your ceiling just a little bit compared to Retzlaff and potentially be the difference in a game or two here or there and be, are we going bowling or not for BYU?
Yeah, I like that. The running back room is pretty solid. LJ Martin's good. I think he's
Yeah.
fine. Um, I think Kinkley Rapati is pretty good. That's a guy who didn't play last year at all because he tore his MCL in the fall camp. And I really thought Aiden Robbins was going to be really good. I think last year we did this, and I was like, "That's the guy," and it didn't work out for me. All right, so uh, I feel okay about that running back room. The receiver room, I actually don't hate, believe it or not. I was going in this thinking that I wasn't gonna like it, but Chase Roberts is pretty good. Um, he's their only receiver that they returned who had 500 yards from last year. But I also think Cody Epps is a good player.
Yeah.
I really do. So, what are your thoughts? Some other thoughts on this offense, offensive line?
Yeah. I like Lassiter too, and Parker Kingston as well. A young guy, a younger guy, for BYU. It should be good. They bring their top five receivers all back, and that's part of the
Right.
confidence that you have with them. And giving a guy like Bohannon or Retzlaff the ability to take and make throws. Offensive line wise, it was terrible last year, right? It was not good. And I guess part of that's maybe the move to the Big 12. Part of that could be other things. Who knows? Um, but TJ Wood comes in, right? You bring him in as your offensive line coach, hoping to right the ship. Caleb Etienne is back. Braden Kime is back. Connor Pay is back. That's your left tackle. Or, I'm sorry, right tackle, left tackle, and center in that order, respectively, I guess. And from there, it's going to be your guards. And you're bringing in a transfer, Austin Louisa, probably going to be playing there right guard for you. We'll see how he does. Going to be adjusting to new um, quality of opponent, right? That pace of play as well. So we'll see how it is. I don't think it can get much worse than last year. I just assume law of averages is going to get a little bit better in terms of these guys getting another year older, right? These are going to be three seniors that you have that are all returning, and maybe that change in the scheme, and maybe also just getting back and having a whole offseason of just committed to running the football has got to fire up an offensive line, right? Has got to fire up an offensive line.
Yeah.
Just be able to, 45, 40, maybe 35, 45 times a game, you're going to be firing off the football. And you know what you're going to be able to do for most of the plays of your season.
Yeah, I like the continuity there. Like you said, we'll see. I really like Connor Pay. Not because I think he's like like really incredible football player, but um SEC media day or not SEC Big 12 media days, he was pretty awesome. He's also got sick flow. He's really good with the microphone. He's got good interviews. I would recommend anyone listen to him talk. But yeah, and then I look at this defensively, and Kalani Sitake has explicitly said multiple times that Jay Hill is the guy, that he is the most that he is the smartest person that he's been around, to summarize, essentially. And this BYU defense struggled a lot last year. Okay. You get some guys back on the defensive line, like Tyler Batty, who led the team in sacks, of course, but you need some guys to step up there, right? You have to have it. You have to have it. I do think they were a pretty disciplined team. Uh, in general, and the BYU fans might not think this, but they were like in the top quarter in college football in terms of like penalties against, so or penalties for. So they actually were pretty well disciplined. Punting the ball, Ryan Recco was a monster. He was a second team All Big 12 guy, third in the country in punting average. He's gone. Now his brother's there. I don't know if he's as good, but that is a factor. I think when you talk about defense and you have a really good punter and your defense is still bad, uh, it's a problem. It's a problem. It becomes more of a problem if your punter is not as good as he was.
I do think they had a couple of injuries that set them back last year, especially in the secondary. But going off of the D line there, yeah, you mentioned Batty. I really like him as well. John Nelson is a guy I wanted to bring up interiorly. Um, Probably your best defensive lineman, or at least interior defensive lineman. He's got to stay healthy as well. For he's a senior coming back, which is awesome. And I do see a theme of your front guys, a lot of upperclassmen, a lot of old veteran guys for you at BYU, which is similar to the offensive line, right? That's a good thing. That's a really, really good thing to try to, not fix the defense, which I guess was fine in some games last year, but, help it be a strength of your team, especially if you're maybe worried about the O line. How is it going to look if you got quarterback worries potentially there? Yeah, I don't know. I think their defensive end group in general just has more talent than last year. Um, so it should be pretty good, or at least hopefully better than next year. Moving on to linebackers, right? You lose a couple pretty darn good guys, right? Max Tooley, AJV, which is tough. But I do think this group as a whole is pretty still darn freaking good. I like them a lot. Jack Kelly from Weber State, he's a guy familiarity. You talked about Jay Hill, familiarity with him all the way back to Weber State there. I mean, Hill was obviously not obviously, but he was head coach at Weber State for about 8-9 years there from 2014 to 2022. So a little overlap there, which you love that continuity with those transfers. And
Yeah,
Ben Bywater.
I thought Jack Kelly was a good yet. I think he's a good player.
Yeah. Ben Bywater. I like him a lot. Um, Harrison Taggart, right? Young kid, sophomore, redshirt sophomore. We like that as well. You got a couple guys injuring, but I do think the group is deep, and I think there's talent behind the top end there, which is always good, pushing those starters for reps and whatnot.
Yeah. Let's go to the secondary. I thought the secondary, dare I say, was okay last year, but you
Even through the
lose
injuries.
even through the injuries, but you lose a ton of snaps at that cornerback spot, right?
Yeah.
You get Jacob Robinson back, which
Good.
which is huge, right? But no Eddie Heckard, no Camden Garrett. We'll see how this group is, and they did go get, um, is that Mark Collins? Is that how you pronounce that? Mark Collins, from Weber State, as their transfer that they brought in that cornerback room. Who I don't know if he'll start. I mean, my guess is he's familiar with that Jay Hill defense because he's a redshirt senior. So I believe he was with Jay Hill back in that when Jay Hill was over there.
Yeah.
So
I think at least if he's
my
not
guess is
playing
that he
opposite
starts.
Robinson, if he's not playing opposite Robinson, I think they can put him in the slot too, which is nice. Some versatility there, um,
Yeah. Where's
along with
that?
Micah Harper and whatnot.
Right. Exactly. So I don't know. I think they got a lot of. I'll say they got a lot of pieces that I think they're gonna have to fiddle around with in this fall camp to figure out what is their best option going forward. And yeah, I guess it starts with Jacob Robinson, you know. So we'll hopefully we see some improvement, man. I really like BYU as a program. I like Satake and what he does. I think the Big 12 would be better. That rivalry, that BYU Utah rivalry, like you want to talk about big time rivalries in the Big 12 with Texas and Oklahoma gone. I think BYU Utah having that one just be a significant rivalry again
Mhm.
requires BYU coming back and being very good. I think they can. They've shown that they can perform at a high level and compete with the big dogs. I know they can. They just
Yeah,
need more 60-year guys, more
eighth year with
COVID
the mission
years.
trips, right? I
Yeah.
do think um just to touch up on that secondary as well, the being the strength of your team in that cornerback room, Thierry and Alexander, that's a true freshman that they are pretty darn high on, and they think he can potentially play right away and help him, which would be awesome. Opposite a guy like Jacob Robinson, pushing a guy like Marcus McKenzie or Maury Bamba to at least elevate their game and figure out from their safety position. Right, Talon Alfrey returns. He was hurt last year. Ethan Slade's a guy that played pretty well last year. Raider Demooney is a guy that returns as well, a young, talented kid. And then Faletau Salulala. Wow, I just butchered that. But
Satula.
Satula, thank you. He's a gem of their recruiting class. He's a high 4-star, a guy they cannot wait to get on campus. Um, and so again, adding to the depth and versatility of that room can give you things in your secondary. And yes, you're going to need pressure up front, right? You're going to need your linebackers to step up. But I do really like, in terms of comparing to last year, or I guess some other teams in the Big 12, this defense could be a lot worse. And I do think th- yeah, it's not too bad at all.
Well, I want to talk about
And
their schedule. Is that all right? Can I move on?
yeah,
It's brutal. It's brutal.
why are you
So,
going to Laramie? Why are you going to Laramie?
and to SMU, I know the whole Power Five thing is pretty recent, but well, I guess SMU is Power Five now too. But I mean,
But
just
when you
what do we do?
schedule
It's
that,
Southern
yeah.
Illinois at home, at SMU, at Wyoming. Then you get Kansas State at home. You go to Baylor, which is like a winnable game, but you got to go to Waco. Okay. Bye. Arizona at home, Oklahoma State at home, UCF on the road. Bye. You go to Rice Eccles in Utah, which is a rivalry. That's gonna be awesome. Kansas at home, at Arizona State, and Houston at home. Like every winnable game, right? Besides Houston, like every game that I'm looking at, I'm like, all right, they got a chance to win that game. It's on the road. Every single one. Every
Does
single
not bode
one.
well. Does
That is why that win total is at 4.5. And it's juiced to the under. And you know what? And it's a sin to do this, especially in the Big 12, to just take unders right on teams that have low win totals and take overs on teams with high win totals because you know that it's actually going to be the opposite. But this is a team that I cannot, in good conscience, take the over for. Like, I understand they're trying to change the dynamic of their offensive identity a little bit, but Jake Retzlaff is not doing it for me. The offensive line, I think, will be better. The defense, it's not really doing it for me either. And the schedule is brutal. Like your winnable games, Houston at home. We'll just call that a win. Okay. At Arizona State, man. At Arizona State. Baylor winnable game. At Baylor. Southern Illinois. You get it. Thankfully, you get that game at home. Like, what's next? You're going to um what's it called? Starts with a C. Whatever. The city that's in. At SMU. At Laramie. Dude. We were talking about before, thank God Arizona State doesn't have to go to Laramie, but BYU does. That is not an easy place to play at all. So I'm not very confident. I will not be betting under 4.5. That'd be ludicrous. Um, but well, I don't know if it's ludicrous, but I just in terms of picking over under win total 4.5, I think my expectations for BYU are to go 4-8 with wins against Houston, with a win against Baylor, with a win against Southern Illinois, and then maybe, maybe a win at Arizona State. Wyoming,
Yeah,
maybe.
that the at Wyoming is brutal. I do think they're a team that's uniquely equipped to be okay there, right?
Because
I think
they already have the altitude there in Provo.
yeah, and they run the football, or they're at least attempting to run the football this year,
You're
which
right,
obviously bodes
absolutely.
well. But yeah, you said it. This schedule is brutal. The home and away split is a big deal in the Big 12. It is a big deal. And or I'm sorry, BYU last year kind of struggled on the road, other than a nice win at Arkansas, right? Other than that, I mean, TCU got blown out, West Virginia got blown out, Oklahoma State, you lost, you blew that game. It's not easy pickings going on the road in the Big 12, and they understand that now after 2023. It's brutal. I mean, also, what's that? 6 road games, right? 6 road games, or yeah, 6 road games is brutal. I'm with you here on the under. As much as it pains me to say, I do think this team gets better from a year ago, but the schedule does not work out. Now, if you can beat Wyoming, right, and maybe you steal one at Baylor and you're 3-2 going into your bye week, you got a chance to put some momentum together for the back half of the season, which would be awesome. But I do think you're gonna run into that middle stretch is brutal, right? And then you could get some breathing room there. Week 13, week 14, two teams that are probably towards the bottom of the Big 12.
But
But
after you've gone through your schedule,
now you do have more depth this year, I think, than you did last year, which is
Yep,
nice because last year you were not quite built to play um, in the
in the
Big
Big
12, which is
12.
fair. I mean, though the Houston, Cincinnati, they were not either. UCF struggled as well. So yeah, I unfortunately the under here for BYU.
Let's move on. Let's talk about the University of Central Florida, the Fighting Gus Malzahn's over there in Orlando. Gus Malzahn taking over the offensive play calling this year.
Yeah,
That's a big deal. That is a huge deal. He's pretty good at that, if you ask me. He's pretty good at that.
he's got some fun
So,
weapons to play with here.
yeah, I mean, well, let's get into it. Like the quarterback room, KJ Jefferson and Ja'Cory Brown.
Yep.
Uh, two, I'll say similar type players because they have similar builds, I guess. They're both really large human beings that can run. KJ Jefferson, I say, could actually throw the ball. I have not seen Ja'Cory Brown do that effectively yet. But yeah, KJ Jefferson, it'll be interesting because I think John Rice Plumlee was everything that Gus Malzahn wanted, but I think KJ Jefferson kind of fits the mold a little bit better of what he wants. I mean, everyone's gonna say this, all right. He's not Cam Newton, obviously, but it's that's a lazy comparison, I think, but it works in the sense where I think he may try to use KJ Jefferson like he used Cam Newton. You might try to run him a little bit more inside. Like Arkansas did not run a lot of design runs, mostly to protect him last year. He was banged up, but he still had like 700 yards on the ground. I mean, they ran design runs with him, but I think Gus Malzahn's got something cooking for him over there. So I'm really excited to see what that's like. Plus the running back room, man. RJ Harvey and Penny Boone. Can you think of a better Thunder and Lightning combo? But the Thunder's 240 pounds.
Bro, you're looking at two guys that had over 1,400 yards last year. Two
Yeah.
top 8 rushers for their respective schools, and they're both in the same backfield with KJ Jefferson. Holy cow! And a running guru like Gus Malzahn, and just to throw Johnny Richardson, Miles Montgomery in there. This is a really nice room, and they did a really good job there. And yeah, I think they're gonna really appreciate what he can do um, with those guys. And Harvey Boone, Boone's a big dude, right? Harvey's a little bit more small. He's
Boone
five
is
nine,
huge.
205, but
He's
Benny Boone is six
huge.
one, 242. We're talking about Eddie Lacy, Seattle type big, but he runs the ball extremely hard. He was tough to tackle. And yeah, I think they're gonna enjoy having him there at UCF. Who's, by the way, he's a big time portal at him. He was at Louisville for a little bit. It was a nice win for them to add to a room, and I think that's kind of the beauty of it.
Yeah, and I look at the receiver room, and maybe it's a little bit thinner, but I think they have some guys that are pretty experienced that
I
I
don't mind the
like.
room. I don't
Kobe
mind.
Hudson.
Yeah,
Kobe Hudson's a good football player, man.
real good player. I think he's gonna really take a step and become that alpha in the room. I mean, you lose a guy like Javon Baker. That's
He almost
gonna
had 1,000 yards last year.
yeah, yeah.
I mean,
With John Rice Plumlee and Tim McLean stud. But yeah, Xavier
and Javon
Townsend comes
Baker
back.
across him as well.
Oh yeah, yeah. But sorry, Xavier Townsend comes back. I think he's a nice chess piece. What you can do with him versatility wise. Javaris Johnson, a nice little gadget, 5'10", 167. That's fun. Jacoby Jones from Ohio. He had a nice 2022 season, along with most of, I believe, Curtis Rourke and the rest of the Ohio team. And then Ajay Hall comes in. I believe he's a walk-on, if I'm not mistaken, and what they did there for him. But it's more of like a shoot the moon and see what happens there. Anything he gives you is gravy. But again, to just add a body like that in your room, it's pretty nice for UCF.
Yeah, I think this receiver room, the story is that there's a lot of guys in there that have played college football, right? Like when I look at Xavier Townsend, I'm like, that's not a guy that separates all that well, right? He only had like one and a quarter yards per route run, which is, not exactly where you want to be at. But I think if he could definitely take a step up, he's played good college football. He's only a junior,
Hmm.
right? So who's to say that he can't improve, right? So, and like you said, Ajayi Hall is a very interesting one. It's a isn't he like a preferred walk on? He's not even on scholarship.
Yeah, they did the PW. Him and I think Cormani McLean as well in Florida. I mean, it's really cheap in state tuition there, so you can use some NIL money to pay for the tuition to keep.
Right. Yeah.
You
I'm
only have
sure
X amount
that.
of scholarships, which is pretty nice move for their collective and the coaching staff there. But again, yeah, nice, just a fun piece to add to your room. And by the way, Kobe Hudson, I didn't realize he was from Auburn as well.
Yeah.
Him and Javaris Johnson. I guess Javaris Johnson's joining him now, but cool little Auburn reunion over there in Orlando.
So then what are the thoughts in the offensive line here?
We'll see. I think you do not have a ton of starting experience on your
No,
O line coming
you
back,
you really
right?
don't.
Looking at most of your left side, or presumably left side, right? Amari Kite, Adrian Medley, Caden Kilter. These are guys that, kind of new to playing, you know, UCF football, or at least Big 12 football. It's 6 starts between the three of those guys. On the other side, Keegan Smith, I really like, as well as Marcellus Marshall, two guys you feel pretty good about. But um, other than that, the bench is almost like I almost feel better about the depth and like how they go 9 deep as opposed to just the starting five. I mean, Height and Marshall, who might play tackle, might play guard, who knows there. I think that could be a nice duo for you and a good start. But if you're gonna run the football and run it well, you're gonna need a good offensive line.
Yeah. I think it benefits to have KJ Jefferson because, having a mobile quarterback like that, a large one, that's
Yeah.
durable is a big deal because John Rich Plumlee had a problem staying on the field. Right. That was a legitimate issue that he had. So yeah, it is interesting to think, man. Just a couple years ago, in the same quarterback room was John Rich Plumlee, Tommy Castellanos, Timmy McClain. And now we have KJ Jefferson and Ja'Cory Brown. What a crazy world. I know we talked about that a little bit on another
What about
episode, but
isn't Mikey Keene? Wasn't he also UCF?
Mikey Keene, I forgot about him as well.
Wild.
Jeez Louise. That's crazy. I mean, QBU. And Dylan Gabriel. What are we talking about?
Oh yeah.
Literally like
The guy in that
a,
room.
a crazy percentage of college football's starting quarterbacks once played at USC or UCF. That's kind of
Pl-
nuts.
Plumlee just got drafted in the XFL, first round guy, which is awesome.
Crazy.
Could be fun in that league.
Yeah. Well, let's move over to the defense, right? You add Ted Roof to that defensive staff. D line is solid. We talked about there's a couple teams in the Big 12 with some solid defensive lines. Lee Hunter, you've mentioned it before. Ricky Barber's healthy now.
Yep.
Derek LeBlanc is eligible. Like this is kind of pieces coming together. It's all coming together.
Yeah, and also Najee Kelly, former high recruit from Miami, when he's healthy, he puts it together. He's a pretty darn good player for them. And
Yeah.
he's just kind of similar to a Jai Hall with different, totally different circumstances, but he's more gravy in terms of what he can give you. If he's healthy, fantastic. But they also have other guys there. Malachi Lawrence, proven guy, I think somewhat 7.5 sacks last year, 10.5 tackles for loss. That's fantastic. Dylan Dotson coming over from UT Martin. 19.5 tackles for loss. Is that true there? 6'3", 255 on the edge there.
It's
I love
crazy.
that. I love that there. And Jamal Johnson's a nice talent for you. A guy you know, kind of growing up in the weeds there on the edge. This is a much different I guess this is a real strength in your room
Yeah.
after losing,
And Morris Brash. You lose Morris Brash.
yep, exactly. Which kind of crazy. Now here's the thing. Consistency is going to be the thing, I think, especially interiorly. Lee Hunter, he has all the talent in the world. 6'4", 320. He moves like you should not move at that size. It's been like that since high school. Um, but how is his conditioning, right? How is his effort down to down? How much of that can you hide and can you just gear him up for, big time snaps, I guess, and that comes with the depth of a guy like Ricky Barber, right? A guy like
Yes,
John Walker, a
exactly.
guy like Matthew Alexander, and
Derek
whatnot there.
LeBlanc.
Yep.
So I'm saying like the interior defensive line is crazy. Like I think that depth there, I think allows you to not because you saw I always use LSU as the example, like in that Florida State game, man. Makai Wingo was dominating in the first half,
Yeah.
and he was just gassed. He was playing every single down. And in
Yeah.
the second half, he could not get pressure on Jordan Travis, and Florida State took advantage. And like things like that, that just having that depth there, I think is going to be huge. The linebacker depth is also way different than it was last year. Way different.
Oh yeah. You're bringing what? 5 people? Five new transfers? Is that true? Holy
That I
cow!
think that I think are all I'm counting
Four.
four, but either way.
I've got
Yeah,
five. I don't know why, but
all guys that have played meaningful college football games that uh, almost all of them have played Power Five football. These are solid gets, solid pieces, guys with experience that I think you're gonna be able to plug and play, and not only plug and play, like because you have the luxury of having these pieces, you kind of get to figure out what works. So, like, I think Deshaun Pace is really talented. I have a feeling that he'll probably be the guy, but then you can kind of figure out from there, like, what are your pieces? Where do they go? Where do they fit? Who's watching film? Whatever it is. I mean, that's a stingy thing to say, but just like they get to pick, who they want to play, right? And they get to
which
see
is a
what
luxury.
works.
Absolutely. The fifth one I was referring to is Ladarius Tennyson. But he's also probably going to play that star position. I have him in the linebacker
Mm,
set, just
got it,
because
got it.
Deshaun Pace probably going to play linebacker, maybe a little bit star. They'll move him around like he did his DB up at Cincinnati, who, by the way, we talked about in our Big 12 Media Day, where he was at Big 12 Media Days last year in 2023 for Cincinnati. This year was there again, this time representing UCF. Kind of crazy about the times that we live in college football, but nonetheless speaks to the character he has to win over a locker room and a coaching staff this quickly. for UCF and the familiarity that he has with the Big 12 and UCF playing against them for a while now. Another guy familiar to the Big 12 is Josiah Pierre. He is from Texas Tech. He had 66 tackles a year ago. You really like that. Ethan Barr, Vandy, Zaire Alexander, a little bit more fun from Idaho. See how he transfers to the Big 12. And Cam Moore is just, I don't want to call it still learning the position, but he's year three, and they got talent ahead of him, which is nice. He can continue to grow and really develop until called upon. So we'll see. I mean, you got to feel good though, right? Well, what they did here, you got to feel good.
Yeah, I will comment on the secondary. Don't sleep on it.
Yeah,
It's one of those ones I think we have to wait to see how it plays. But I'm just gonna say it now, just don't sleep on it. All right, I think Central Florida fans, maybe you're getting a little bit excited about that. I mean, last year, the secondary wasn't that bad last year, right? It was more that run defense that was literally a bottom five run defense in all of college football, bottom 10. Same thing, right? That was it's somehow you smash mouth Ollie Gordon in the mouth. I'll never understand that game and what happened there. But the point is your run defense what was bad, and you bring in a whole new set of linebackers. You bring in um a set of new guys on the offensive, or sorry, new guys on the linebacking core, defensive tackle. You're deep now. Like that run game feels like it could get a little bit patched up. You bring in Ted Roof also on your defensive staff. The secondary, some pieces there, dude. There's definitely some pieces.
it's a nice mix of returning and then infused talent to the portal. I mean, it's safety. You got Quadric Bullard and Damari Henderson coming back that played nice for you, did some things playmaking wise, but then you bring in a guy like Brian Threats, who's played a lot of football for Cincinnati there, and Sheldon Arnold coming in from FCS level, which is fun. So we'll see how that safety position looks up, but I do think the floor is a really nice. It's fine. It's something that you can live with, but the upside is there with maybe your guys taking a step in year two, but also that were those transfers coming in and elevating that room. Cornerback Brendan Adams, right, 6'3", 190. I like that a lot. He played a good amount last year.
Jason Johnson?
Oh, freshman baby.
You
Is
love that.
he
The lower rated cornerback of the two cornerbacks they brought in that class. And look,
grit?
these are beat writers, right? This is not me saying this, but I am reverberating what beat writers are saying about this kid. It is that they're most confident with him at corner over some of these other guys that have had meaningful college football snaps. That right now it was early, it was spring, but they seem like they're really comfortable with him playing at corner. And that is exciting because then that means that they're really deep in that cornerback room, I think.
Yeah, to me, that the story of this team and what they did, Gus Malzahn in the portal through recruiting classes the past couple years, is depth. It is the Noah's Ark right now. You got two of everything, and that you feel pretty darn good about. Maybe not. I mean, O line. I guess you do feel pretty good about depth wise, and maybe not the high end talent that you want right now. But the reality is you're built for injury. You're built for depth in this Big 12, and they're a team with a pretty substantial win total, and teams that maybe kind of get frisky, Big 12 championship, Big 12, whatnot, and really make some noise pushing on and just kind of climbing the rankings that are the tiers of the Big 12.
Let's go to that win total, right? Their schedule. They played New Hampshire at home, Sam Houston at home, TCU on the road, then a bye, Colorado at home, at Florida, home against Cincy, at Iowa State, home against BYU, home against Arizona, at Arizona State, bye at West Virginia, and they finish with Utah at home. Honestly, it's a pretty tough pull in your conference games, right? Your out of conference game, your premier one at Florida, going to the swamp. It's gonna be tough because you could see Billy Napier fighting for his job. Either way, like Florida's gonna be coming off of um you know, potential wins against Miami and Texas A&M that are kind of rolling them in the right direction. Um, or it's going to be backs against the wall, right? Like we're playing, like Bill Napier playing for his job kind of
Yeah.
game, in the swamp.
And
So that's going
maybe
to be
we see
tough.
DJ Lagway. Maybe we don't, but
But you know that these UCF boys, these Power Five UCF boys, these boys that are recruiting at a premier level in the Big 12, you know that they want to win this game so bad. And you know that they're going to bring absolutely everything at this. So I'm not gonna like when I'm tallying up the win totals, I don't count that as like a chalk, like an automatic win, but I also don't chalk it up as a loss either. So that'll be really interesting. I have a really tough time with this win total. I have a really tough time with this win total because of some of the dynamics. Like luckily, you play Arizona and Utah at home, but you draw Iowa State. I think going to TCU is pretty tough. Again, you bring up the Florida game. These are all things at West Virginia. Like these are all things. Like to me, this is not the easiest schedule. Sure, you get Arizona State, you get Cincinnati at home, and you get Colorado at home, right? Those are games you gotta win. Then if you win at New Hampshire or versus New Hampshire and Sam Houston, sure, awesome. I don't know. I think they can go over, but I struggle. I struggle taking this over, but they are good, man. I think this could be a really good team. I'm gonna go with the under though. I think 7-5 is the most likely outcome, despite how hyped up I was about this team and ready to talk about them.
listen, I'll go over. I think I hear everything you're
All
saying,
right,
and I
all
and I
right.
hate
I like
I
that though. I
hate
like that.
yeah, I hate the Florida. Like, why is that in the middle of week 6? What are we doing? Regardless, though, you still have to play them, and I guess it doesn't really matter conference-wise. It's sandwiched between two games that I think you should win in Colorado and Cincinnati. And pretty nice is you play in New Hampshire without Dylan Lobb, without Max Brosman. That's two NFL guys. Not that you would struggle with them to begin with, but
Yeah.
just wanted to throw that in there. We love Dylan Laub. And so yeah, you should go, 2-0 in conference out of conference. We'll see what Florida does. But yeah, you TCU, Utah, Zona, Iowa State, West Virginia, those are teams you don't really want to be playing in the Big 12, but they're gonna be on there because there's a lot of those teams this year. And I think the way
They could
Malzahn is, the depth
so
that they
they could
have,
so steal a couple of those games.
absolutely. There
They
is no
so could.
reason that they cannot. And I know a couple of them on the road, right? TCU and Iowa State, West Virginia, but I still think they can win. I still think they get done. I'm gonna go over 8-4 plus.
Yeah. I mean, part of the reason why I'm going under is because some of these teams that I'm high on, Utah, obviously. I am high on West Virginia. Spoiler alert. I'm high on Arizona. You already saw that. I'm high on Iowa State. I'm high on DZU. I'm a little bit higher on Florida than I think a lot of people are.
Yeah, definitely.
So I don't know. Again, they're gonna steal some of those games, maybe, but it'll be interesting. I'm really excited to see this team. I'm really excited. I can't wait to watch UCF football this year. Let's move on. Let's talk about Cincinnati. Scott Satterfield.
Let's go
Man,
time.
it's seriously, it's go time. Um, this win total's at 5, and it's not well. The schedule is easy, and we'll talk about that later. But it's juiced to the over -160. So they're saying that like there is a very high implied probability that they're going to win more than 5 games, essentially. So that's crazy. So Bearcats, are you ready to go bowling in the Big 12? Is the question. But can they get there? Is the question. Can they get there? Well, let's go look at the quarterback room. I'd say it's an upgrade. I mean, I
Absolutely.
I love Brennan Sorsby. I know
You
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 do
are not
too,
alone there.
but I
Six
love
three,
Brennan Sorsby.
6'3", 235. He can still run a little bit. Not quite like Emory Jones was a year ago, but I think, and not like, Scott Satterfield, quarterbacks have passed, Malik Cunningham, et cetera, et cetera. But I think he
Emory
can give
Jones.
you enough. He can give you enough, right? And he's also he's going back to Big 12 countries from Denton, Texas. You love that. I'm sure he's gonna be motivated. Chip on his shoulder to play some of those Texas schools. And yeah, I think I know technically we talked about it in the Big 12 media days. If you didn't watch it, just we'll tell you again. Technically, Satterfield said that there's quarterback competition
I mean, three
outside.
guys.
I think that is more speaking to the depth of the room in Brady Litchenberg and Samaj Jones, right? To Litchenberg is a Richard Jr. from Toledo, Ohio. I like him. He played a little bit last year as well, but Sorsby definitely a higher upside there. And I think production as well at the Big Ten last year with Indiana. Samaj Jones is the quarterback of the future from Philadelphia, 6 foot 218. The fact that the reports are pretty glowing already is exciting to hear for Bearcat fans. I know that. But the reality is in 2024 and 5 and 6, I'm looking at Sorsby. I think Sorsby's the guy, and I'm really excited to see him play.
Absolutely. He's really good. In the games we saw at Indiana in the Big Ten, he was really, really effective. I thought that was such a good get. You can check out our video on Brennan Sorsby um on our channel a while ago when he did commit to Cincinnati. So good. And I think the rest of that backfield's good too. I'm looking at Corey Kiner, who
Oh,
was a fantastic last year. I'm looking at Evan Pryor. Oh, I'm looking at Chance Williams, who averaged 6 yards at Grambling. Oh, I like these guys in this room. I really do.
yeah, I think it's nice, versatile pieces there. Corey Kiner, you get a speedster in Chance Williams, a little shifty guy who got better adjusting to, Power Four football from Grambling State, and Evan Pryor, former high recruit from Ohio State. You love that. You absolutely love that. And with the way that Satterfield they're going to run the football, you have to. You should with Corey Kiner and crew back there. I think it worked for you last year. He had over 1,000 yards, 5.5 yards per carry, 5 touchdowns, 68-yard run, which is really nice. And I think that absolutely helps you. And it opens up, what you can do pushing the ball down the field with Sorsby and some other receivers that are definitely an improved room from a year ago.
Dare I say good?
Yes, let's talk about it. Let's
Let's talk
say
about it.
okay, so that you have to start with Xavier Henderson, right? This is where this room starts and ends, right? Not ends, but this is where it starts and we'll see how it goes. It'll go off of him basically, right? That's what I'm trying to say. 700 yards last year, only 3 touchdowns, but that not quite his own fault. Um, yeah, I he was, you know, he was as because they brought him in from Florida, right? And that was a big get. I mean, they were hurting for wide receivers just last spring, and they bring in Henderson and I believe Smith as well, and those were the two leading receivers, and it worked out well.
Yeah. Tyron Smith is a really good football player.
Yeah, Arcusa
I
fans,
mean,
they know that. They know that.
I mean, he's the reason Scotty O'Hara got hired at A&M as an offensive analyst because of Tyron Smith, right? And because of Kelly, not gonna pretend like I know how to pronounce his last name at Mississippi State. But Tyron Smith was phenomenal in 2022. Phenomenal. Smaller guy. Okay.
Mhm.
Wicked speed, really good hands, separates well. Okay. He went in the transfer portal, goes to Texas A&M. Then he's like, nah, cut it. Kind of got something over here with Gavin Hardison and co. Only it's a year too late. I would love to see him in a Scotty Walden offense there at
Yeah.
UTEP. I really would. But Tyron Smith was a fantastic get for Cincinnati. So anyone who doesn't think so is not correct.
Yeah, he's a really nice piece to add in that room with Smith returning, with Henderson returning, even Evan Prater. They were so bad last year, wide receiver wise, depth wise, right? When they first got there, they moved Evan Prater, quarterback, into that wide receiver room. And you also bring in a guy like Tony Johnson from FAU,
Yeah.
right? You got Jamoy Mays from UAB, a couple freshmen coming in, Takari Anderson, Kale Woodburn. Uh, the room looking significantly, more confident, I think, and explosive than it was a year ago.
Let me please talk about this offensive line.
You go for him.
Uh, we get a everyone back alert. I mean, everyone's back.
That's kind of wild. How often do you see that in college football, right? And let me ask you this: how big a deal does that do for you, right? How
Well, it's
important is
massive.
that?
It's so massive. Not only like because it's the same system. Brad Glenn's second year there as the offense coordinator. It's so important also too because for those running backs, like that chemistry that you're gonna have running through holes, like
Mhm.
you don't understand like that there is sort of like a chemistry that goes on there. Now, good blocking is good blocking, right?
Yeah.
But there is some degree of comfortability that Corey Kiner's going to have running behind those guys, which he did a fantastic job of doing last year, by the way, not to mention. But I mean, Luke Condra is one of the best guards in college football. He's phenomenal. I do, uh, we'll see if those tackles, take another step in the right direction. But I am of the opinion that this offense for Cincinnati will not rank 109th in points per game, that it will not rank 120th in red zone scoring, that it will not rank 106th in second half points per game, aka, coaching stuff, that they're not going to have a 40% percentage on fourth down. I am of the belief that this offense is going to improve drastically this year. You're going to see and day, a night and day flip.
Yeah, I think so too. And not only what it does in terms of bringing your O line back, all five of those continuity and the beauty of all that with your starting group, but that gives you another year to add depth, to build depth there. There's 8 guys that they like on that roster that can play O line, and we've talked about it. They need that, and that's not something they had last year. And we'll see how Buford does. You mentioned the tackles, and Williams as well, but if they don't like it, they sprain an ankle, they don't play well, whatnot, you don't like a matchup, you can throw in some other guys and see what works in a pinch. And that's just amazing to go through the greatest schedule that is the Big 12 and kind of be able to fly with the bullets. That is.
Absolutely. Well, I'll let you kick off the defense. What are we looking out for in this defense for Cincinnati?
So we can't do a Cincinnati defensive video without talking about the Don, right? Dante Corleone, really tough to hear. I hope he's all right. Obviously, pretty serious medical news. Understand he's battling some blood clots and whatnot, and hope he's all right. Not only much bigger than football. I know Cincinnati would love to have him on the roster for this year, but I hope he's doing all right in his medical endeavors.
Let me
Um,
comment on that real quick. Like there with that, people are going to point to Sam Hartman and be like, "Oh, but he came back, right?" There's with blood clots, and depending on where they are, right? That is a big deal. The location of the blood clot and like what kind of it's going to determine what kind of operation you're going to have, like what kind of rehab you're going to have. Like there are a lot of factors that go into that. Like your recovery for blood clots could be significantly longer, and we don't know how many blood clots there are. Like, so this could be pretty significant, or this could be a Sam Hartman situation where he's out like 2 weeks and let Mitch Griffiths play against Bum State and loser U. So could be like that. Although Pitt is not loser U. That might be.
oh,
But uh yeah, so just my just want to update people on that and give maybe more medical diagnosis to that or medical take, I guess.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. Moving on to the actual football field though, at edge or your defensive end position, right? Eric Phillips is coming back. He's not terrible. He had over 400 snaps for you last year. You lose, I believe, Malik Van. He played well in his sample size. Um, so they got to replace him as well as Griziak, played almost 600 snaps and was pretty good for you. But yeah, you got Eric Phillips there. We'll see how Rob Jackson, a couple other guys there, a couple transfers, I believe. Darren Varner from Temple and Wisconsin, Micah Coleman from Eastern Michigan. Maybe some smaller school guys. You see how they translate. And maybe they're just nice depth pieces for you there. Um, but yeah, and then interiorly, obviously Dante Corleone is brutal. They lost there, but Jalen Hunt comes back, which is nice. Now he's not Dante Corleone, he won't be, but it's still a fine piece to add there, especially in that run defense position. But behind them, they're kind of thin though, at least I think. And you're relying on a guy like Cameron Rutherford or elsewhere
Yeah,
to be in your interior defensive line rotation. Now they run a
yeah,
3-3-5, so they only have one on the field, I believe, right?
but it needs to be a good one. Like
Yeah.
in the Big 12, like we've talked about this, right? In the 3-3-5, it's a cyclical league, right? I mean, you bring in the Iowa State, the Matt Campbell, the that 3-3-5 that was so effective for a number of years in the peak of that uh veer and shoot offense, right? Where you just had it was so effective, and the 3-3-5 was just a way to kind of counter that. And now teams are looking at like, oh, there's only six in the box.
Mhm.
So my name's RJ Harvey, or my name's Gus Malzahn. I'm gonna hand the ball off to RJ Harvey. My name's Mike Gundy. I'm gonna hand the ball off to Ollie Gordon. My name is Joey McGuire. I'm gonna hand the ball off to Taj Brooks. Like the Samuaba, or did I say that right? Samabu or whatever.
Yeah, yeah, same album. Yep.
DJ Giddens. Um, I look at Dallin
Cam
Hayden.
Cook,
I look at,
Houston,
yep,
or
Cam
Cam Cook,
Cook.
TCU.
Cam Cook. I look at. I mean, there's just so many running backs in the big. Devin Neal. What am I
Uh,
talking about here? So many good running backs, right, in the
oh,
Big
the
12.
the West Virginia buddies.
Yeah, Jaheim White and CJ Donaldson. I mean, there's just so many. So that is the part about Cincinnati that I am concerned about. If Dante Corleone does not come back.
No, that's not crazy at all. And you also lose some of the pieces there. Deshaun Pace goes. Now he was playing more third level defender, but he obviously, did
Hmm.
his best in the run defense there. Trying to help out the defensive linemen is that linebacker position. And you bring back Jack Dingle, who I like. I do like him. And Jonathan Thompson, right, as well. He's uh had a nice season last year as a younger kid, getting kind of thrown in. He did some nice things. You bring in Jared Bartlett, who can do some fun things for you off the edge or blitzing from that second level. Jake Golday, right, is a fast and physical player himself. And so you're just kind of figuring out which these pieces work into each other. Um, but Dingle's pretty damn good. And you've got some other nice pieces. Now, is it a full room? Is it a deep room? I don't know. You're actually adding Brady Dragish, former quarterback turned linebacker. Shows you the versatility he has and the size he has. Holy cow. But he's obviously a couple years away from contributing, or at least feel comfortable contributing for this team. So, unlike offensively, where you had a bunch of depth, I thought in a lot of places, you know, looking at the front seven there, and I don't quite see the depth. Do you?
No, I don't. I mean, this was a team that was 129th in allowing yards per play. They were 129th in passing yards per completion. They didn't get to the quarterback. They didn't force turnovers last year. Opponents ran the ball 5.5 yards per carry. That was with Dante Corleone.
Yeah.
Okay. That was 128th in college football. I this defense, it was bad. And I don't think it's gonna get better. You had some shakeup in that defensive coordinator room for sure, but when I look at the defensive line, like you need Corleone. You need it. I mean, you're looking at their returning production on defense, right? They're a bottom 50 team in the country in returning production if you include Dante Corleone in that. And if you assume he's not playing, right? You need him so badly. And that's secondary, and we'll talk about it. I'm gonna say there's a lot of pieces, but they very much went into the transfer portal because they knew they needed to, because there had to be something done. Because like if you get a couple guys in the portal in your defensive back room that are like, all right, yeah, this is a hole, boom, uh we're just gonna plug it with some really good guys. Awesome. And do I think that Cincinnati got a couple decent guys in the portal in the secondary? Yeah, I do think they got maybe a couple decent guys, but they got so many in the portal. That makes me believe that they're not confident with that position and they're hoping that something sticks.
I typically I do agree with you absolutely. I do think in this case they got I don't want to say lucky, but I think they feel good about what they added, and I think
Like
they're
Derek
pretty
Canteen.
fortunate. Oh yeah,
I think
Canteen, he
Derek
can play
Canteen is very
safety, he
good.
can play corner for you. He's probably going to be that leader of that defensive secondary playing boundary safety for them, which is nice. Pairing up with a guy like Kai Stokes from Ohio State, former high recruit there as well. He's a young kid, but they like what they have so far. Pairing with a guy like Canteen, I think it's really nice. That give and take there. Canteen's a guy that's been there, done that. Obviously, Stokes is a guy that's a little bit more a green for that defense. And then Josh Minkins coming over from Louisville, where Scott Satterfield was a couple years ago. There's that connection there as a depth piece in your safety room. But yeah, 7 transfers. You mentioned it though. It's crazy. And it doesn't stop there. Mekhi Miller, right, coming over from Ohio, right? Oh, and obviously, actually, New Mexico State after that. But he's a guy that's probably going to be playing your nickel position, star position that Pace played last year, and we'll see how he turns out, how he adjusts to Big 12 football. The star position is going to be put a lot of stress on this year in the Big 12. That's going to be a position I'm really curious to see because we talked about the running backs in this conference that are really, really good. So you got to come down and play the run, tackle a guy that like 6'1", 245, Penny Boone. But you also
Yeah.
have some pretty damn good quarterbacks that are going to put you in binds. They're going to move you with their eyes, and you're going to have to be really disciplined and instinctive to play star position this year. We'll see how Mekhi Miller does. At least he does have good experience overall in college football, which you like to see. Um, yeah, Jordan Young returned, which is nice. I like that. I like that. Keelan
Well,
Carroll too. Yeah.
uh, yeah. I don't know. That's good. I'm glad that you're higher on it than I am because someone needs to be.
Well, here's the thing. It's not this defense is being taped and strict together. Like it could be a couple dominoes here and there could fall, and it could really fall apart.
Well,
And
yeah.
one of those is obviously Corleone, which is
Well, yeah.
again just even more brutal. But
And here's the thing, you could be right about the secondary, and you could like in the secondary might be really good, but if they can't stop the run, it's not gonna matter,
doesn't matter.
right?
No,
And all of a sudden you're like, okay, maybe I'm just gonna step up one extra guy in the box, and then all of a sudden you're getting the top taken off of you, you know. So we'll see how that goes. In terms of their schedule, it's easy. That's why their win total is at 5. They play Towson at home, Pitt at home, who's not very good. That roster stinks. At Miami of Ohio, who you lost to last year, and they return a lot of their players. They do lose their best pass rusher. They do lose their running back. They lose their wide receiver, who's probably one of the best in the MAC. They lose some things, but they do not lose their quarterback. A lot of those defensive pieces are there, you know.
the coaching staff.
Yeah, I mean the coaching staff are they all back in in the MAC? I'm checking right now. Yeah, I think so. These coordinators are. I mean, why would you? I mean, you just won the MAC, you know. You run it back, you know. But yeah, so and then they play Houston at home, right? So they could go 4-0, right? But then getting that fifth win, like where do you get it? You get Arizona State at home, which is nice. Okay, they can come there. Just some of these teams that they play though, like Arizona State can run the ball. They can run the ball.
Yeah.
Like I'm looking at a team like Kansas State that can run the ball, Iowa State that can run the ball, West Virginia that can really run the ball, Arizona State, UCF, Texas Tech. I'm just looking at these teams and I'm like, oh, like this offense could be really good and it might get ruined, unfortunately, by, not only Dante Corleone's unfortunate medical situation, but just how bad that run defense is just going to be, you know?
Yeah.
Like it could be really bad. And as high as I am on the offense, it might not be enough to make up for any of that. With that being
No.
said, I'm taking the over. Absolutely. Let's go. Cincinnati, you are going bowling this year.
I
You're going
I
bowling.
I love it. I'm gonna piggyback you as well. I give me that. Give me the offense. I think and Scott Satterfield's a guy that we have been critical of, right?
Very.
Um, very. But I do think if he takes the team to a bowl game and he's got another offseason to work on, your front seven, bolstering. I do think there's an upgrade there at defense coordinator. Tyson Vett, he comes over from Iowa State. I know the pieces in the front seven might not be what he wants, but I think he can figure it out. Excuse me. And yeah, don't tell me the yawn. I'm fired up for Cincinnati. I know that they're hungry to
Yeah.
get back to the bowl game to national relevance that they were just a couple years ago under Luke Fickell. So let's go. Over 6 or over 5.5 or 5 actually, which is awesome. It's also at 5.5 other places. That's why what do we always say? Shop lines. Always do it.
Always
Make
shop
sure you're getting the
lines.
best value.
Absolutely. All right. Let's look at Colorado here. Deion Sanders going into his second year as head coach of Colorado. You got to change up at offensive coordinator, kind of. Pat Shermer was the offensive coordinator at the end of last year, but really it's his first full year, first full off season to install what he wants to install.
Yes.
And I don't think it's going to look as like pro style as a lot of people are saying it's going to be. I think Pat Shermer is a good offensive coordinator. I do think Sean Lewis is better. I don't think that's a hot take. I think one coach has a head coaching job in college football and the other one does not.
Yep.
Um, yeah, I mean the quarterback room aside from Shador Sanders, look, if Shador goes down, there's trouble. Okay. Um, he's a very good quarterback, all right? And people can hate on him for, I don't know, things that he says, whatever. Honestly, I don't really care. He's a really good quarterback. He does have a problem, of course, taking sacks. Some of that was his offensive line, of course. But he's a good quarterback. He's a really good quarterback, and he elevates the play of this offense significantly. Significantly. And anyone who doesn't think so is crazy. Is crazy.
Yeah,
So
I'm not worried about them offensively at all. At all.
no, I think they take a step forward in their offense last year. I mean, I'm looking at the numbers. I mean, obviously their run game was horrendous last year, but I mean, you look at I'm not gonna say efficiency metrics, but they did really well on third down. They did really well passing the ball, of course. They were a top half offense in college football. It's hard to call it that because the run game was so bad. People want to talk about this as like a top offense in college football. It was not a top offense in college football. It was a top half offense in college football. All right. They literally could not run the ball. They were dead last in yards per attempt running the ball, like dead last. Like out of 133 teams, they were 133. Okay. Um, yeah, they also averaged the least amount of rushing yards per game as well. So just yuck, right? Yuck. But the running back room gets a boost.
Well, it completely revamped. I mean, you lose your your top 4 running backs are all gone, right? For better or for worse. I do think Edwards is a fine
I
piece
think
and
it's
so is
better.
McCaskill. Now, you would like to have a guy like Dylan Edwards in your room. Absolutely.
Sure. I think
But in terms
Hayden's
of running
really
between the
good.
tackle, yeah, running between the tackles, what you're gonna try to do a little bit more, establishing that run game. Dallin Hayden's that dude. He's gonna be really nice.
Yeah, absolutely. Like he's gonna be a bell cow. He's gonna be an absolute bell cow. And it'll help
And Michael
alleviate
Welch
some of that.
too. How about Michael Welch? 5'9",
Yeah, yeah.
195.
Could be beast. Could be beast. So I have no problem with the running back room and people sure if you disagree, you go in the comment section. Tell me that I'm an idiot for thinking that the running back room is decent because Hayden's back there. All right. Let's go to the receiver room. We already made a video about this. It is one of the best wide receiver rooms in college football. Debatable. All right. Debatable. And I know there's a lot of Colorado haters out there. I'm not I'm not I think that recruiting is very important. So I'm not of the opinion that Deion Sanders is helping his program by not really recruiting at the level that he should be. However, he did craft an absolutely devious wide receiver room. I mean, you're returning almost everyone. You don't get Xavier Weaver back. Fine. Okay. Upgrades. Will Shepard enter from Vanderbilt, who was, I don't know, their best receiver for like the last 3 years.
Hmm.
Although you could argue that London Humphreys kind of took the reins there, but I not took the reins. He wasn't more productive than Will Shepard, but in terms of like better athlete. Uh, yeah, Jimmy Horn comes back. You add LeJontay Wester.
Oh
Holy
man.
unbelievable! And look, you're gonna have Travis Hunter. They're gonna want Travis Hunter to play both ways, but at some point, man, at some point, the altitude, man, it's gonna get to him. It's
Or
gonna get to him.
injuries set in. I do think last year you brought in a bunch of guys, and Weaver was good, and Horn was fine for you. But I do think you needed like Hunter was one of your best receivers last year, and you kind of needed him to be playing and playing well. And that was just the depth situation that they had last year. This year, much different, right? You go six, dare I say, seven deep, and the bodies, the pure talent in this room too with the young guys. I know
A Marion Miller,
they don't recruit high
Braylon
school well.
Miller,
Yeah, Cordell Russell, a young kid from TCU, four-star high recruit as well. Miller had a nice spring, and he was the guy that burst onto the scene, against USC, right? All in that second half, 200 some yards, right? It was crazy. And then he kind of disappeared. And it was like, what's going on there? But he was a freshman, right? It happens. He had a nice spring. He pairs with just a different body type than your guy like Webster or Horn or Hunter are. And Webster's also going to return punts too, probably. He was a all conference guy at FAU doing
stud,
that.
stud. He's unbelievable last year. 152 targets,
I mean,
2.66 yards per reception or per route run.
yeah. I mean, he's not going to be that kind of high volume in this offense. So
No,
there's other mouths to
no.
feed, but it's also he's going to have better matchups. He's going to have better opportunities. What he's going to do with those targets that he gets, he will maximize it more. And if you get a guy like him in space with some wiggle, see ya.
Yes.
Goodbye.
Well, let's talk about the offensive line. Speaking of making wiggle room in the run game, at least, I think it's better. I mean, obviously. I mean, I think Colorado upgrades pretty much almost at every position, right? Offensive line's one of them. Can Jordan Seaton play ball? Is a huge question. We know he was a 5-star recruit. He's coming there as a true freshman. It's very hard to come in to college football and play at an offensive tackle at a high level, 5-star or not. It is tough to come in and do that. Can he do it? Is the question.
Yeah. How quickly can you learn how much? I mean, he is the left tackle, right? It's pretty much, cemented in stone, but how quickly can he adapt? If he struggles, do they take him out? I mean, Shador Sanders took a ton of sacks last year, like you said. Now, were some of them his fault? Maybe, maybe not. But the reality was is he just did not trust his O line, and they couldn't run the ball either. So they were losing games. A lot factored into that. But Seaton, I mean, he just looks the part, man. That was a big time win to get a body like that to play left tackle for you. And it sounds like the early returns are pretty nice. He's learning quickly. It was really nice that he was there for the spring, which obviously gives you a huge leg up unless if he was a summer enrollee instead. But elsewhere, I think a lot of blending to do, right? A lot of, getting to know each other with bringing in what, like
Yeah,
six transfers.
five new offense. It's gonna be brand new for starting five.
Well, I mean, yes, yeah. Hank Zelinskas, he's probably coming back. He was only a freshman last year. He didn't play a ton, but he's at least a returning Colorado guy. It's going to be, in the top half of your rotation there. But
Mm-hmm.
I mean, other guys, Justin Myers, right? Good, really good pass protector for them. Um, Last year at UTEP, he'll be nice, I'm sure. Sanders will love having him behind to throw to. Khalil Benson from Indiana, another power four guy.
I think an
With
interesting one
good,
that they got in the transfer portal was Peyton Kirkland,
yeah,
um, from Texas. It won't be a factor this year, but definitely an interesting depth piece there for sure.
yeah, and I'll throw one more. Tyler Brown, at left guard. He is a physical run blocker, and if you're trying to run the football more with Pat Shermer and Dallin Hayden, those guys, Tyler Brown would be nice to have, and what he can do, creating holes for you. Maybe he's not a every down starter, but in certain packages and certain drives against certain teams and whatnot. And we've already talked about a couple teams that I can see on their schedule this year with a light front seven. And if you want to move the football efficiently and keep these other good quarterbacks off the field in the Big 12, running the football absolutely does that. And Tyler Brown, I know he's coming over from Jackson State, which is nice for Dion to reunite.
Well, let's move on to the defensive side of the football. Let's go to the D line. I mean, it's highlighted by transfers, and they're all, well, I say all, the ones that are going to play significantly are pretty good. I
Yeah.
mean, I look at BJ Green, who's all Pac 12. Well, we talked about him earlier when we talked about Arizona State. Very, very good football player. Dane Hayes, fantastic player for Pitt. I thought Samuel Okunlola was a really good player for Pitt as well. Chidozie Nwankwo for Houston, I thought was a very nice defensive tackle for them. Quincy Wiggins is definitely a good addition. He was a highly rated recruit over at LSU, just couldn't break um, that rotation like he
Yep.
wanted to. It's a like it is a I'll say a power five defensive line. Last year was not. This year it is a power five defensive line.
No, absolutely. And you mentioned those guys. Last year they brought in a ton of transfers, a little bit more fluff than substance. This is legit productive players at good programs over multiple years, or high upside guys that can be rotational guys like a Quincy Wiggins, uh, Chidozie Nwankwo. He's a guy, two-time state champion wrestler back in high school. You love that. You absolutely love that. We know how much we love our wrestlers on our offensive and defensive lines. Rayan Buell from Ohio, I believe. Uh, Really good player, good run. He can be productive in the pass rush as well. Amari McNeil returns interiorly. You're looking at a pretty deep and experienced line. Now, it's not all with Colorado, but it's experience in college football in general, and how if they can gel together, if they can figure it out um, with the rest of that defense and Robert Livingston, it could be a pretty good group, which a year ago it was not. And the only question I do have is how consistently can they get to the quarterback? I like BJ Green. But who steps up beside him in terms of getting after the quarterback? but I do think you have enough bodies in there that somebody's going to, but we'll see how it gets to.
I think they'll have a chance to get some pressure on the quarterback. Um, it might not be perfect. It may not be perfect. How do you like this linebacker group?
I mean, you've got pieces, right? You've got Levante Bentley, who had 7 starts for them last year, second on the leading, second team on tackles just a year ago, former Clemson transfer. You'll bring in a couple other guys, right? Nikhil Webb Walker, so State, Jalen Wester. I'm sorry, from FAU. He's a physical guy. He moves pretty well sideline to sideline. Johnny Chaney from Florida A&M. He was a good blitzer. He was a guy that was all SWAC kid there. And you've got some nice pieces here. We'll see how it shakes out, you know, at the top end. And you've got a couple pieces there. I don't know if the high end ceiling is there. I think it's a pretty average group all around. But
Yeah, I'd
you
say it's below average,
okay?
to be fair. That's what I think. I just I don't know. I don't think they're like you said that I think they're deep. I think they got the pieces there. I just don't know. And here's the thing, they run a bunch of different looks out there. So you could see a situation where a bunch of those guys are out there at the same time or different combinations of them. But I like uh I like Trevor Woods. I just I'm not in love with this linebacker group, if that makes sense. I'm not in love with it. I'm not married to it, you know? Uh I do like the secondary group though.
Yeah, they did a good job. I mean, they had some nice. I mean, you have 3 or 4 returning guys. Shallow Sanders, Cameron Tillman, Craig, obviously Travis Hunter, one of the best cornerbacks in the country. It's a good place to start with. But I know they brought in a couple guys that you like as well, right?
Yeah, Preston Hodge. I like him at nickel for sure. DJ McKinney at corner. If he's the guy that ends up pairing with Travis Hunter on the other side and he ends up being good enough, we'll see. I don't know that I love the depth in this room, if I'm being honest. So I don't think you have a lot of margin to be mixing and match. I mean, I think there are pieces here. Okay. I just when I look at the depth, I don't see like the talents going all the way back. Does that make sense? Do you see it differently?
No, I think you're right. I think you bring in a young guy like Colton Hood. Don't think he's quite ready to play right away, but he's a nice piece again, similar to Peyton Kirkland, we talked about in the O line, where in terms of the future of the position, that's a guy that you're not recruiting in the high school ranks well, but you're getting young transfer with multiple years of eligibility. You like that. Um, we'll see though. I mean, I
We'll see.
how much better is this defense from a year ago? Because last year it was not good, right?
I think
It
it's
was
pretty significant. Like, look, for example, I would say that this defense was looking at the numbers right now. I'm looking straight at them. I would say that they were a bottom 20 defense in the entire country.
yes,
But
no complaints here.
metrically, right, that doesn't necessarily mean like, obviously, if that defense was to compare, like go against like Akron's offense, they would do well. Like there's certain things to think about that, but like statistically, they hover around bottom 20, right? I think they'll break the top 90 at least. I think they could break top 80. This will not be a top half defense in college football. It probably won't be a top 75 defense in college football, but it doesn't have to be to see significant improvement in this defense. It really doesn't. So I also like the Robert Livingston hire as well at the defensive coordinator. I know you lose Charles Kelly over to Auburn. I think Robert Livingston was a good hire. Those you don't know, he was defensive backs coach at the Bengals. Uh, he was mentored by Lou Anarumo, who's Dr. Lou. If you know anything about him, he basically just super aggressive, right? And I think they're going to use some of the athleticism that they have in the secondary to their advantage. The question is, are they going to be overestimating the athleticism in that secondary? I don't know. That's up for. I think Coach Livingston's a very respectable defensive backs coach, so I have a feeling that he's just going to be fine in evaluating his talent in the secondary.
They've already talked about moving Hunter, like shadowing their best receiver, putting him in nickel, putting him in different spots. It reminds me of Jalen Ramsey, right? What they did with him, playing him in the nickel or whatnot at the NFL level. It should be fun. I mean, overestimating. I mean, Travis Hunter is really good, right? I'm not gonna sit here and say he's not. He's unbelievable. But do the other guys step up? How quickly does Preston Hodge transfer over? Does Shiloh Sanders, how does he improve in coverage? Does DJ McKinney? I mean, you're gonna need a guy opposite of Hunter or filling in for him if he's moving into the slot. So I guess we'll see where it is there. But also, what helps a good secondary is, or what helps a secondary out is a good pass rush or a good defensive line, and whatnot. So, or you don't have to add an extra linebacker on the field to stop the run, whatever it may be. So if those guys up front can get some good push, it's gonna help the defense all around. And that's part of the emphasis why they went out and got so many transfers in the D line, impact players.
Right. Let's look at their schedule. They get North Dakota State at home, Nebraska on the road, at Colorado State on the road. What? Sorry, that was redundant, but you get it. Baylor at home, at UCF, by then Kansas State at home, at Arizona, Cincy at home, you get a bye, at Texas Tech, Utah. Then you go play Kansas in Arrowhead, and then Oklahoma State at home. So I would say that month of November is brutal.
Telling me,
Brutal.
man, that is awful.
I mean, just for boot, they're like, oh, we'll give you a bye before we give you the Big 12's toughest 4 game stretch in uh yeah, so that's a brutal stretch. One thing I will say that's brutal about it too, you go to Arizona, right? Nebraska. It's not gonna be easy at all.
At Nebraska too. That place is going to be buzzing.
Yeah, Colorado State. Uh, when we saw that matchup last year, Colorado State is going to be coming back for them for sure. That was a very intense game, very fun to watch, to be honest. The Cincinnati game also makes me nervous too. Like, if they can't figure out how to run the ball, I mean, it seemed like in the Pac-12, like late in the season, when teams really got to Shedeur Sanders, when one, they were able to get pressure on him as a quarterback, but two, when they kind of just sat back and in coverage and just you had 8 guys drop and made Shedeur Sanders uh pick things apart and make him have to basically make him have to do everything, right? And I could see Cincinnati in a situation where they might find themselves in an advantageous spot. And a spot where, maybe their offense can compete, you know, uh, if Colorado struggles against that secondary. So, yeah, the over under win total is at 5.5. I am going to take the under 5.5. I think there's a scenario where they definitely can make a bowl game. But I'm going to go with the under 5.5. I do think they're not ready yet. I think that stretch in November is brutal. I think Nebraska on the road is brutal. I think Kansas State's brutal at Arizona. Like at UCF, I don't think they win. I don't think they win Kansas State. I don't think they win Arizona. I don't think they beat Nebraska. And then I don't think they win in the month of October or November. It's already 8, right? Not to mention the Cincinnati game's kind of tough. I think they'll beat Baylor for sure. Like, I just I have a really good feeling about this team and its potential upside for sure. And the offense is very scary, man. It is very, very scary how good it is, especially if that offensive line is as improved as we think it is. I'll still take the under. I mean, this is a team that was second to last in the country in penalties. I mean, Deion Sanders, uh, taking the ball on offense first in overtime. I mean, these are factors in close games, and I think they're gonna have a lot of close games in the Big 12 because that's what Big 12 football is, you
Hmm.
know. And while I like Deion Sanders as a coach, I don't know if I love his in-game coaching. And his clock management, and I'm gonna go ahead and take the under.
Yeah, I'm with you there too. As much as it pains me, as much as I thought I was going to take the over, I see 5.5. I feel see how good I feel about this team, especially the depth this year in year two of Sanders or of Dion. Wow, I can't believe I just called him Sanders. Um, yeah, it's but the schedule is brutal. I mean, North Dakota State, I mean, they're not what they once were, right? Still a fine program there. But at Nebraska, at Colorado State, those are going to take a lot of energy out of them. We saw what Colorado State did to them last year in Folsom Field. This time you're going on the road there. Now, obviously, you expect to win that game, but the reality is it's still going to put some wear and tear on your team. And yeah, I just can't get over that month of November, man. You got to get to 6 wins before you get to that. And I will say, to counteract that point there, I will say I do think they're going to beat one of the teams at the top, top five of the Big 12, and they play just about all of them, right? Kansas State, Arizona, Texas Tech, Utah, Kansas, Oklahoma State. Those are probably six of the top 7, 8 teams in the Big 12 preseason rankings or odds for the championships. But unfortunately, they draw all of them. They miss out on BYU. They miss out on Houston. They miss out on Arizona State and some other teams toward the bottom half there. And you just you gotta fly with the bullets there. But yeah, I think the schedule's too tough. They're gonna beat some teams, right? The
Sure.
games are gonna be close, but I don't know if they're gonna win. 6 games is it's gonna be a lot big ask this year in the Big 12 to get 6 wins.
Let's move over to Houston. Willie Fritz in his first year, he's got a brand new staff. What do you have for us on the staff over there at Houston?
And listen, Kevin Barbay is spread guy coming over from Mississippi State in 2023. They're bringing over a couple of Tulane guys, Sheil Wood, running the 4-2-5, I believe, and just bringing in special teams coordinator Mike Crizzle from Tulane as well, along with Derek Sherman, the wide receiver coach, and the DB coach, or one of the DB coaches as well, Joshua Christian Young. And even reuniting with Emin Naghavi, right? He was a guy that is the only mainstay on the Houston staff from the Dana Holgerson era. He was with Tulane and Willie Fritz in 2022. Kind of interesting how it becomes full circle just like that. But I like this staff. I mean, they did good things at Tulane, and I think they're going to do good things at Houston. Maybe not in year one, but in terms of building the program for sustained success in the Big 12, absolutely. And what say you?
Well, I think Willie Fritz is a great coach. Uh, it's not going to happen this year, though. It won't. That's fine. I do want to look at the quarterback room, though, and it's interesting because compared to some other quarterback rooms in the Big 12, this is not bad. This is not a bad
No.
situation to have. Donovan Smith is, I'll say, likely going to be your starter. Zion Chris, still a very talented, very athletic player. We saw that at Louisiana last year in the Sun Belt. And his explosiveness and his ability to make plays and extend them. I think both of those quarterbacks are pretty good. I'm of the opinion that Donovan Smith is not bad. Okay. Donovan Smith has played a lot of football. He's been put in very tough positions his entire career. He's been put in
Hmm.
tough positions. And there's some games he's found ways to win, including like Texas he almost beat Texas last year. There was a bad spot on the field that basically cost them the game. It's pretty ridiculous. So I do think Donovan Smith can get some stuff done. I mean, he had 600 yards on the ground, 2,000 yards through the air, 22 passing touchdowns to only 13 interceptions. Now that's a decent amount of interceptions, but um, I still believe in Donovan Smith. I really do. Obviously, he's in your bottom quarter of quarterbacks in the Big 12, probably, but that might just speak to the depth of the quarterback position in the Big 12 to maybe previous years, you know?
I think it says more about that than it does the player that is Donovan Smith. I mean, he's 6'5", 235. What's not to like, right? Can do it on the ground as well. But and yeah, dude, I'm a fan of Zion Chris. I'm a guy that in year one with Fritz, I do not think it's crazy to see Zion Chris start
You
games
saw him live,
over a
didn't you?
healthy Donovan Smith. Yes, he came up from Louisiana, came up to Minnesota this past season, and he was electrifying. I know PJ Fleck was a guy that really wanted him kind of out of that portal window, and because he saw him live, how well he did. And if he's gonna back up a quarterback, back up a seventh, eighth, 20th year senior, or there's Donovan Smith, come out to Minnesota and back up Max Prosper. But reality is he chose Houston, he chose Willie Fritz, and I think that their staff is glad to have a guy like him. And they're familiar with him too, right? They're not far from
Mm-hmm.
the Raging Cajuns there from Tulane.
Yeah. So now we get to the part of the roster that, people maybe aren't so high on, right? The running back room, Parker Jenkins can be pretty solid, right? And they have some other spots in there. I don't know what the sharing of the backfield is going to look like. I would like to believe that Parker Jenkins, as a true sophomore, who was pretty good last year in true freshman role, I would like to believe that he improves and that he takes over that role as the main guy in that backfield. Um, However, Stacy Sneed and Tony Mathis Jr. could definitely get some carries. I think they both each got about half the amount of carries that Jenkins got last year, but we'll see. We'll see what that running back room looks like. But I want to go straight to the wide receiver room and just say it hurts to lose guys like Sam Brown, Matthew Golden, even Dalton Carnes, who honestly got some good snaps as a true freshman. I just I look, Joseph Manjack is pretty good. Okay, he just came off of a 500-yard season. They got Makai Muse from Georgia. Great story there. Okay, but I don't think he's the same talent level as Sam Brown or Matthew Golden. You know, I do think Marquis Shoulders is very interesting portal get from Tulsa. I think he's got a lot of interesting qualities to him. I think he could stand out in this wide receiver room for sure. I think Malik Carr at tight end is a very good get that they got from Michigan State. If people don't remember, he was their second leading receiver last year. So I do think they did well getting Malik Carr there in the portal. And I do, again, Marquis Shoulders, pretty decent. I don't know how good Makai Muse is going to be, though. Well, he was effective, though, last year for Georgia in a special teams role. So but we'll see. I mean, did you have any other thoughts in this receiver room other than like, man, it could have been really good this year to like, they maybe just patch this up just good enough.
You're relying on a couple transfers, and that's not ideal. And obviously, it sucks when you lose guys like Matthew Golden and Sam Brown, and you're kind of scrambling to replace him. And Joseph Manjack, I like him. Right, he's a guy doesn't wear gloves, by the way. That is awesome. That is awesome.
That is
Very
awesome.
reliable guy. But beyond that, a lot of questions. Marquise Shoulders, you mentioned him. I do like him. I expect him to take a step up and probably be that second player, uh, potential second guy on that roster. He graded out really well last year for Tulsa, along with his running mate there, Devin Williams, as well. But we'll see. I do think with Smith's frame and his rushing ability, as well as Zion Chris as well. And I do like Parker Jenkins. I think he'll take a step this year, going to year two. I think you're going to run the football, and Willie Fritz does. I mean, he was like they've ran the football well there at Tulane, and I think that's going to probably be the focal point of this offense. But I do want to mention a guy like Malik Carr, your tight end there, bringing him in from Michigan State. He's a guy that they're pretty darn excited about and what he can do for them in addition maybe aid maybe a weaker wide receiver room, and you can kind of use him to create some big plays or spark plays in your passing offense.
Let's move over to the offensive line then. It wasn't an amazing year for the offensive line, right? But they also lose a ton, you know? I mean, look, they're 45th in PFF in their pass blocking grade, 60th in run blocking, and it was highlighted by Patrick Paul,
Yeah,
who was
he's
phenomenal,
gone. Yeah, he's
but
gone.
he's gone. See ya. Gone to the NFL, taken in the second round. So Tank Jenkins is the only guy on this squad that is returning, and they brought in four transfers in the offensive line, but I don't think any of them are going to start. I think this might just be the backup offensive line from last year.
Which is not ideal. Well, I'll say this: I don't quite know. At least there's familiarity with the coach, right? I mean, like I said, um, like Javi, he was there last year, and so he knows those guys, and they understand Donovan Smith. They got a relationship with Parker Jenkins as well. So at least there's continuity with themselves too. If they're running on the second team in the twos, they know how to play side by side. But it's I don't want to say it's doom and gloom, but it's not quite exciting. You want as a fan, right? You want to see, oh, this new transfer we got, this new recruit, blah blah blah. Like these are the guys that are gonna save us. It's not, fun and shiny to see. Oh, well, there's this senior that's from Louisiana Monroe, Peyton Dunn, that's gonna play for us next year. Guy like Hobbs Lee, guy from FIU as well. He's gonna play for us next year after being in our program for a couple years now. It, but it's reality, all right? It's the reality. You got to build off of Tank Jenkins and see where you get.
I think this offensive line is going to be terrible.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be really bad. But we'll see. I've been proven wrong before many
How how
times.
you how do you combat that though? Right, it's running quarterback. You got Don Smith is a big dude. Zion Chris, you add an extra defender in that box. You and obviously helps with your numbers wise, doing the RPO stuff. And with Mississippi State last year, you saw them. They used Jaquavius Marks out of the backfield, right? I mean, they did some fun stuff, but
Yeah, you're gonna have to get really Barbay is gonna have to be in his bar bag. I mean, you need to I mean screens, but like that's the thing, like that's the thing. People are like, oh, I run a terrible offense, so I'm gonna run a screen. Like, yeah, you gotta find a way to produce offense without having to run screens on every third down, right? And because that's bad offense. That's not how you
yeah,
run an offense. Um, so we'll see. The offense scares me because of that offense line. It really does. It really does. Now it's nice. Like, thank goodness that they got some of those transfer guys. But tell me, Jake Wiley's gonna be no, no, like this offensive line is terrible. All right, that moves us to the defense of side of the ball, where you have your defensive front, right? You lose Nelson Caesar, right, and Jamari Caldwell. Jamari Caldwell, he's in Oregon now. Very good
yeah.
football player. All Big 12 guy,
Hmm.
both of those guys. So what are your thoughts on the defensive line? I mean, you get Keith Cooper, which is
You love
nice.
that. That
Called
is
Willie
massive.
Fritz. That was huge.
We'll see how Anthony Holmes does taking the next step in year two of significant playing time. He had 3 sacks a year ago. I like Quindario Lee. He's a guy they brought in. He's not going to be like, this massive, um, game-changing player for you in your defensive line, but I do think the versatility he brings. He was once a Minnesota commit. They were pretty high on him, and the versatility that he brought, defensive tackle, defensive line, inside out, what you can do, on early downs, maybe playing outside, stopping the run, maybe on third down, rushing the passer, you can move them inside and get your other speed guys off the edge there. So we'll see. Again, you mentioned those losses; they're big time, and we'll see what happens there. But outside of Keith Cooper, not a lot of proven, high talent guys you feel really really good about. It might just be a committee, and I guess you got a bunch of upperclassmen there that you feel pretty good about using, I guess. But other than that, it could be tough. And this is another D line, man, another D line. in the Big 12, that's, a question mark, not a strength. And with all these
Yeah,
good
I feel
running
like
backs,
it's either or. You're like you got that UCF interior D line, or you got that Iowa State or that Kansas State, and you're out here. You're in poop land, you know. So I don't know. Yeah, I don't love this defensive line, which leads me to the linebackers, which
it's
I'm
better.
yeah, it's better. Still some projection there though, I guess. Not really. I
Well, Corey Platt, you feel pretty good about his floor, what he can do,
mhm,
being pretty familiar with, the Tulane staff.
yeah. I'm trying to remember who they had at linebacker last year, but uh,
Jamal Moore's played a little bit.
well, yeah, he played.
Malik Robinson had 81
Oh, that's
tackles
right,
for
that's right,
you.
that's right, that's right. And you lose him. So yeah, I mean, the linebacking core could be all right. It's also not
Kendrick
going to
Grant,
mean
though, I
anything.
like him from Louisiana. Another guy
Okay.
coming from Louisiana. He's a disruptive playmaker, and that's how I'll describe him.
Yes, but
Um,
would you describe him as like an edge guy, or would you describe him like is he like what is he going to do for this defense?
I think he'll be stand up, but I think you can push, rush him off the or rush him from the second level. You can move him around. But I think on early downs, I think he'll be playing off ball. At least I believe. But that's I guess that'll be waiting to see. They're running that 4-2-5, right? So
No, I guess they haven't listed as Mike, so okay, yeah, I believe it. I'll ride with you. I think the linebacking core could be pretty decent. Uh, now let's go to the secondary then.
oh,
Last year, okay, um, it wasn't the worst, but it was third downs, man. And Houston fans, you'll agree with me. It was just this was a bottom 10 team in the country in allowing third downs per game, right? Or third down percentage, right? I mean, it was just big moments. Like third down, like it feels like a very volatile stat, right? Because it's like one down, but 48% conversion rate on third down.
jeez, man.
That is so bad. That's so
Not winning
bad.
many football games doing that. Yeah. Is that, can I ask you a question here? Is that just like, and I know over the season, it probably leans to, hey, this is an actual systematic problem or whatnot. Or is it just like they just got unlucky, or is it a little bit of both maybe?
I'll give you a couple stats. All right. Um, completion percentage, 68% allowed. Yikes. That was 129th in the country, bottom five in the country. So it just sounds like the average yard per completion was only 11.7 yards, which was actually top 50 in the country. So it makes me believe that the DBs, were playing up or not playing up. They were able to come up and make the tackles, but it was a matter of like people were just able to dink and dunk down the field, and they put themselves in a lot of third and shorts. I'd have to go see what the actual stat was of the actual third downs. Like, what was the actual average depth of every third down for this Houston team? It, I think it would certainly put a lot of things into context, but defense was not good last year, and I think it's about to get worse, man. I think it's about to get worse. So, what are your thoughts on the secondary?
Well, it's not. I mean, you bring in a ton of transfers, a ton of transfers. Kristen Davis, I like from Southern. We'll see how he adjusts, to playing Big 12 football. Kentrell Webb comes over from Tulane. You like that? I guess he's from Tulane. I guess you like that, right? AJ Halsey, he had good production for you. Uh, I don't know, man. I really don't know. Latrell McCutcheon is a guy, is a former high recruit coming back to Texas at cornerback. We'll see how it pans out this year. I do think if you're relying on him and JD Rhyme and Jeremiah Wilson, all these transfers, I don't think that's where you want to be. I really don't. And I know you mentioned how bad it was last year, and it can't get worse, right? But I don't know if it got much better. I really don't. I guess change is good change, and maybe the new scheme with new players and whatnot, it definitely, you know, what they did at Tulane was pretty impressive. They find some magic there in year one with Willie Fritz. I don't know, but again, there's a lot of questions, not a lot to feel really good about for Houston, other than AJ Halsey. But I mean, if your safety is your leading tackler by 16 tackles, he's making 97 a year, 98. That's not ideal. That's not ideal. And it's kind of what it was last year for this defense.
Man. And then I look at the schedule and I don't really see a single like layup game on the schedule when I look at it. UNLV at home. I think they'll win that game. I really do. I know you're high on UNLV, but I really do believe that they'll win that game. At Oklahoma, Rice at home, who they lost to last year. At Cincy, Iowa State at home. At TCU, bye week. Kansas at Arrowhead. Utah at home. Kansas State at home. Bye at Arizona. Baylor at home. At BYU. Whoa. I mean, their win total is 3.5, and it's juiced to the over.
Sheesh, man. 3.5.
3.5. It's juiced to the over. And when I look at it, I'm like I look at this roster and I'm like, I do not see them winning more than 3 games.
You're gonna have to win you get to win two games in the Big 12. And you're looking at Baylor, you're looking at Cincinnati, um, at BYU. I
But
mean,
Cincinnati on the road,
yeah.
okay.
And those are winnable games for
At
sure, but it's
BYU
not.
in Provo.
Here's the thing. I feel good about Baylor getting better than last year. I feel good about Cincinnati. We both do getting better than last year. Even BYU taking a step here and there. I don't know if Houston got better than last year. And I think their coaching staff, and I love Willie Fritz and what he can do long term there. But
If they win 5 games, I will be immensely impressed. I'm gonna take the under at plus 135.
I'll go as well. I'll go under as well.
So that's it, guys. Thank you guys for tuning in to part one of the Big 12 conference previews. Of course, we talked about all the effort that we put into this, 150 plus hours we put into this. So a like would go a long way. And what would go even further is a subscription on YouTube as well. If you're listening on Spotify, one, good on you. Okay. We know there's some car stands here. We know some of y'all listen to it on the way to work. No big deal. So make sure you guys, if you're not followed already, give us a follow and a 5-star rating. We would appreciate that a ton. And keep listening. Keep staying tuned for these other conferences as well. Football season is just right around the corner. I don't know exactly when it's going to post, but my assumption is that this is going to post sometime between 3 to 3.5 weeks before football season starts. So that's wild. So y'all keep staying tuned in for our other conferences coming out as well. CD, you got anything for us? And part two is actually coming out later this week. So
Absolutely. Stay in tune for that as well. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Also, let us know. You guys are the experts of your team. So if you're watching and you saw maybe we missed a player here, maybe we missed a true freshman that's balling out here and there, let us know. We'd love to hear from you guys as well. And yeah, thank you for watching. If you're watching right now, you are the best.
absolutely. We'll see y'all in the next one.